Okay, councillors, it appears that we have a quorum together tonight, so I'll declare the meeting open. I'm Darcy Byrne, I'm the Mayor of the Inner West Council. Thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight, including the elected representatives. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to their elders, both past and present. Councillor Howard and Councillor Lockie, can I confirm that you can hear me okay? Excellent, thanks very much for that. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on International Women's Day and to pay my respect to all of the women representatives on the council and all of the members of the management and executive who are participating in the meeting tonight. Sorry that we can't be together for what has become a very important civic event, the Inner West's International Women's Day ceremony, in which new inductees are put into the honour roll each year. For understandable reasons, we're separated tonight, but I'm sure I speak on behalf of all councillors in saying that we are determined that that event will continue in greater strength next year. Can I ask, also begin by just acknowledging to everyone participating in the meeting that we are webcasting these proceedings live onto YouTube. They're recorded there for posterity. Please don't make any defamatory remarks because anything you say tonight is being said in the public domain. There are legal consequences to anything that is said during this meeting. Councillors, I'll move on next to disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures tonight?
I have one, Mayor.
Councillor Howard.
I have two, actually. A disclosure of a non-pecuniary conflict of interest, non-pecuniary, non-significant for item 5, the local traffic meeting. I work in the office of the state member for Summerhill, who has a representative on the local traffic committee. I will remain in the meeting during discussion and voting on all items as the vote of the state member is exercised through a representative. I also have a further non-pecuniary, non-significant conflict of interest in relation to item 19, Railway Terrace and West Street Petersham intersection. I work in the office of the state member for Summerhill. I will remain in the meeting during discussion and voting on all items as I did not attend the meeting referenced in the motion and have no other conflict.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further disclosures tonight, councillors? There's no further disclosures. That has been noted. I'll ask everyone to please join me in a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 8th of February, 2022. Are there any clarifications or corrections to those minutes? If not, will someone move the adoption of those minutes? Moved by Councillor Drury, seconded by Councillor Howard. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously, I presume. Is anyone against that motion? That's been carried unanimously. We'll move on to the public forum. Can I please ask the minute takers to read out the list of items for which there are registered speakers and to identify and to bring that up on the screen? Thank you. I'll go through it if you've got it up on the screen. That's helpful. Thank you. So we've got registered speakers for item 1, communicating with the Inner West community. Item 3, National Assembly of Local Government. Can I ask the minute takers to scroll down? Thank you. Item 12, notice of motion, gender inclusion. Item 13, affordable housing contribution scheme. And item 14, rainbow pathway for World Pride. Sorry. Then item 15, Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatic Centres. Item 16, Dulwich Hill Station Crossing. And item 20, Inner West Council Anti-Racism Strategy. So if there's anyone...
Yeah, there's one. I believe.
Sorry, Councillor de Cruz.
I believe there's an extra speaker for item 17, demerger. If Catherine can confirm that, there seems to have been a mix-up with the registration.
Councillor de Cruz is inquiring about the. I'll just ask the minute takers to scroll. Oh, so item 17 is not on there currently. Is that what you're saying, Councillor de Cruz?
No, the speaker's not on there.
Yeah, well, there are no registered speakers for item 17. So who's the person that you're referring to?
Yeah, Alice Kershaw from Roselle wishes to speak on item 17, and
Okay, I'll just check with the office to see if Miss Kershaw is on the Zoom.
Mr. Mayor, we didn't receive any further registrations to what appears on the screen, and we can dial the speaker in if necessary.
Okay, well, Councillor De Cruz, if you're in contact with Ms Kershaw, do you want to let her know that we're able to bring her into the meeting? She's not in it currently, and we'll get on with hearing from the other speakers. So if I could ask the minute takers to scroll back up to the...
Sorry, can I ask a request for item 20 in terms of the order of the speakers?
What is that request, sir?
Thank you very much. The first one will be Yana, the second will be Queen, the third will be Wael Samri.
You're welcome to work out whatever order you want between you. That's no problem.
Thank you,
Can
sir.
I just ask that there be no further interjections so that we can go back and hear from the first registered speaker. If you've got an issue you'd like to raise when we get to that item, let me know and we'll deal with it then. So if I can ask the minute takers to please scroll back up. Thank you. The only speaker for item 1 is Belinda Daly of Lilyfield. Belinda, are you there?
Yes.
Thank
Hello.
you. Just
Hi.
before you commence, we'll just let all the speakers know that under the Code of Meeting Practice, you're allowed to speak for 3 minutes.
Yes.
We encourage you to keep an eye on the clock that should be displayed on your screen. We're not in the practice of extending time beyond 3 minutes because if you're the last person to speak tonight, you wish that everybody else had been kept to time. So thanks very much for your cooperation.
Thank you. So I'm Belinda Daly and I'm representing the Balmain Roselle Chamber of Commerce. And I'm asking Council in putting together the EOI for media spend.
Sorry, Belinda, we've lost you there.
Sorry, it's just muted. We're asking Council to consider other independent and important local publications, not just those ones listed on the agenda today. And I specifically represent the Darling magazine. And the Darling magazine covers the areas of Balmain, Roselle, Lilyfield and surrounding suburbs. When the pandemic hit our areas, we decided as a chamber we had to do something to support local businesses. And we carried out a lot of initiatives, and one of the important ones was launching the Darling magazine. We've now produced 5 editions. And it was a time where all other local newspapers had left the area and we saw a significant gap in the market. With every edition, we reach more than 70,000 people printed and online. And we are highly regarded by locals, even after only 5 editions. We have 60% of our advertisers return, and the local publication really resonates with our community. And people have said it reminds them of the old Village Voice, and they're actually filing and keeping every copy that we produce. We've featured over 300 businesses in this publication, and we are primarily self-funded through advertising, sponsorship, and member fees of our chamber. We use a string of local suppliers, and we ensure with our volunteer team that every single edition gets delivered into people's homes. Like Council, we really think that local free community news needs to be accessed by everyone. But if an EOI for media spend is put on the table, we'll like to ensure independent publications, as well as ours, Darling magazine, are represented, as we do represent a significant area, geographical area of the LGA. So we'd like you to consider us and other independent publications above and with those that are listed on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Belinda. The next item for which there are registered speakers is item 3. The first speaker is Chris Hansen of Little Bay. Chris, are you there?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, speaking for Councillor De Cruz's motion. And I'd like to say that no more incinerators is opposed to any incineration of waste anywhere in New South Wales, given that there is a viable alternative to burning waste to reduce material going to landfill. And there's huge economic and social benefits for embedding the alternative, which is a circular economy. There are also very serious long-term health impacts and also environmental impacts that have been caused and well documented overseas through incineration of waste. So I guess the real issue that we need to address, I guess one of the biggest myths I keep hearing from the government and others, is that burning waste is part of a circular economy. Burning waste is not part of a circular economy for the very simple reason is once you burn a resource, it's gone. You can never get it back. Burning recovered materials or so-called waste is what we call an example of a linear economy. And that's the economy we have now. We're trying to progress and move our economies to a circular economy where material is recovered and reused. As an example, locally, the floor in my apartment is made from an old wharf. That material, instead of being shredded and burnt, was actually made into a floor, and that's what I'm using now, that's where I'm sitting now. So if we have a viable alternative on a local basis like that, can it be propagated? Yes, it can. And we have whole countries, such as Wales in the UK, that are embracing a circular economy because of the huge benefits that it affords the economy. PricewaterhouseCoopers has actually estimated that there would be a benefit to the New South Wales economy of $648 billion to the year 2040. Why is that? It's because the equipment used to process and recover the material can be made here in New South Wales. What does that do for New South Wales? It generates jobs. It keeps the wealth within the state, and it actually strengthens our economic cycle, creates a viable and vibrant industry for us to generate permanent, well-paid jobs. I think the other thing that we need to actually touch on is what are the health issues? A lot of people say, oh, they have modern filtration systems and you don't have to worry about the discharges anymore. My expertise is in management of solid and intractable waste.
I'll ask you to conclude your remarks, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. And certainly while everybody sees a stack and sees what comes out of the stack, I'm concerned with what comes out of the bottom, the ash. Council needs to be aware that the ash has to be managed forever. It cannot be treated or recycled. So I think it's really important.
Mr. Hanson, if you could conclude your remarks, please.
Thank you. I think it's really important that this motion be submitted to the National Congress in support of the creation of a circular economy and the banning of incineration of waste generally. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hanson. The next speaker on this item is Lisa Saunders of Marrickville. Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. So my husband and I started Arnie's Recon December 22nd in 2019. He's actually standing here and I might invite him to speak if he wants to add something. Our thesis was that recycling and electronics and appliance recycling is something that is economically viable, and that a circular economy, it's not just that it's a right thing to do or that it's a heartfelt thing to do, but that actually it's something that is an important thing to do and that has economic benefits. And a little over 2 years later, we've created jobs. We're over 16 people in the company right now. We're close to profitability. What we've also proven is that people in this city are desperate for a circular economy. They are desperate for recycling opportunities. We put out an ad on Facebook. We put out a post on Facebook, and within 2 days, we had 500 responses and 250 bookings. And that was on December 22nd, 2019. And it's been like that ever since. The thing that we find is that recycling and a circular economy and dealing with the magnitude of waste that's both existing and generated and to come, it's a complex problem. And that complex problem requires complex thinking and a complex solution. Historically, recycling has been something that garbage companies have taken on because they're already there, they're already set up. Except garbage and the management of garbage and waste is actually a very simple solution. You take it from here and you put it over there, and there tends to be a hole or it tends to be a landfill. But the thing is recycling is not simple and it's not linear, it's complex. We have over 80 discrete different product lines, and we have 10 different ways that we recycle them, depending on what they are. Excuse me. And so that kind of thinking is what you need to bring to this solution. Burning, it's not just that it provides air pollution, it's not just that it provides ash that you need to manage forever. It actually condenses the toxins. And so in a landfill, you will end up with actually even more toxins in a much smaller space. And so it's not actually even giving you a solution, it's actually increasing your problem. In many respects, you can say it is putting lipstick on a pig. And so what we're saying is that you need to look at the unintended consequences that always arise whenever there's a man-made solution. We do not have the degree of wisdom that has gone into whatever it's taken for nature to arise as it is. If you leave a natural setting alone, it finds its balance, it finds its equilibrium. However, anything to do with man-made solutions, there is always the unintended consequences. And what I urge council, what I urge government to do is actually start to ask what could go wrong instead of assuming that it will all work out. What else do we want to say?
I'll ask you to conclude your remarks as your 3 minutes has expired.
Fantastic. We're good there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Our last speaker on item 3 is Marina Antoniozzi of Erskineville. Marina, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thanks very much. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marina Antoniozzi, and I represent the Bauer Repair and Reuse Center in Marrickville. So the Bauer does not support incineration of waste, as we believe this goes against the principles of a circular economy. The Bauer has a long history of educating the community about waste issues and providing services to help the community reuse, repair, and reuse waste, reduce waste to landfill. A circular economy
We seem to have lost Marina there. We still see her on the screen. What we might do is just move along to the first speaker on the next item. We can come back to Marina once she's been able. Oh, there she is. Are you there, Marina?
Hi. Okay, I'm not quite sure where you got.
Just have another go.
Okay, I'll start again.
Okay.
All right. So I represent the Bauer Repair and Reuse Center in Marrickville. The Bauer does not support incineration of waste, as we believe this goes against the principles of a circular economy. The Bauer has a long history of educating the community about waste issues and providing services to help the community reuse, repair, and reduce waste to landfill. A circular economy is about valuing resources and keeping materials flowing through the economy for as long as possible. At the Bauer, services like our electronic workshops, the rehoming service, and a retail shop support the community to make better choices with items they no longer need. At the Bauer, we see the circular economy as central to our values. We support the idea of moving away from the traditional linear economy of take, make, and dispose to one based on circularity. We believe incineration of waste is not part of a circular economy. Incineration requires a continuous flow of waste to feed the beast, discourages sustainable behaviors such as reusing or repairing, and promotes destroying resources instead of valuing them. Also, incinerators produce harmful emissions that pollute the air and therefore are not sustainable. Better solutions to manage waste include a strengthening of producer responsibility schemes by the federal and state governments that will help manufacturers take responsibility for the full life cycle of the products they put into the marketplace. Bans of goods that are problematic to recycle or repair. Support for changes in legislation to make it easier for people to repair items. More investment in reuse, repair, recycle, and remanufacture facilities to make it easy for the community to access these facilities and to grow the reuse, repair, and share economy. And finally, more education and awareness of these issues. In conclusion, the key principles of a circular economy align with the Bauer's ethos of supporting environmental behaviors while providing social benefits such as creating jobs through repair and reuse services, providing low-cost items for sale or to give away to support those in need, and help to reduce pollution and waste to landfill. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marina. The next item for which there are registered speakers is item 12, and the first speaker is Jody Toomey of Dulwich Hill. Jody, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. First up, I'd just like to thank Councillor Atkins for submitting this notice of motion and her wonderful efforts in communicating and consulting with the Council's LGBTQ working group. We are really, really proud of the way that this has been developed. It's a really positive effort to show the council's commitment to supporting the rights of a large part of its community in the LGBTQ community. It's going to support the council's efforts a lot coming up to World Pride 2023. And also I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Matt Howard's input into it as well. I believe it puts us in a very, the LGA in a very strong area, space to yeah. Thanks. That's all I've got to say on that one.
Thanks very much, Jody. The next speaker is Evan Gray of Marrickville.
G'day, thanks for so I guess I'm a member of Pride and Protest Union Bar. I wanted to speak in favour of Liz Atkins' motion and commend it to council. Obviously, the trans community has been in the middle of a storm at the moment where we've been under relentless attack by the Liberal Party and their mates in Murdoch Press and One Nation, everything else. And it's incredibly important that every section of society stand up and name the problems here. The fact that we've got a legislative set of attacks that will drive us out of work, that drive us out of school, that drive us out of sports games. I think I don't need to go into too much detail. We're all quite aware of the pernicious and disgusting perspectives and what this could do. I mean, close to home, which probably resonate with a number of you, it probably would embolden many people to act like our vocal local Julie Passets on a much more frequent basis, which I think many of us would regret. So I commend the motion in its explicit stance on opposing each of these bills. I'd also say that what is really great about this motion is that it spells out this opposition. We've seen so many corporate pinkwash like inclusivity policies that say we like gay people, we like trans people, and it actually doesn't mean anything until you put clear there that this is what you oppose, this is why, and this is how you're going to crush it. So I commend the motion to council, and I hope to see many more of these kinds of motions coming out of councils in the attempt to fight against what the federal and state governments have been pushing through to attack our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. The next item for which we have registered speakers is item 13. The first speaker is Ben McGowan of Marrickville. Ben, are you there?
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Can hear you.
Fantastic. Apologies for my unclear. The pandemic's just caught me. Yeah, so my name is Ben McGowan. I'm here tonight speaking as a Shelter New South Wales member and the Inner West chair of the Sydney Alliance. I also work as a professional firefighter and I rent within the Inner West. So last year, in conjunction with a broader alliance-led Sydney-wide campaign, residents of the Inner West met with a number of local council candidates around the issue of affordable housing. So I know there's no need to spend much time explaining the realities of the housing crisis. We all know how outrageous the situation's become. And to deal with a disaster of this magnitude, it's going to take all hands on deck, something everyone at the Alliance is extremely committed to, which I think was reflected in the forum last year. So at the forum, we heard from a range of individuals, experts and civil society organisations who live or work at the coalface of this crisis. We heard from our candidates, almost all of whom are here tonight, so congrats to all of you, on what they consider to be their role as local councillors. Most importantly, though, we reached a consensus on specific commitments that these candidates would take with them to council, which is why I'm here tonight. These commitments were as follows. Firstly, an audit of public council land that could be utilised by the council in developing new affordable homes. Secondly, the development and approval of an affordable housing contribution scheme within the next LEP. And thirdly, the council would proactively and readily deploy resources to work with civil society groups like churches towards producing new affordable housing. These commitments were supported across the board from all parties and independents. Every councillor here showed support and signed on to these asks, either directly or by proxy. So we're really excited for these to be formalised tonight. I hope that with such support we can get this done quickly and move on to the next steps. This is obviously just one moment in an ongoing story. The Sydney Alliance Inner West is really excited to continue to work with you. We know that the epicentre of meaningful change is always at the local level, and we hope that the Inner West can be a trailblazer in this space. Our team looks forward to following up with all of you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ben. The second speaker on item 13 is John Engler of Sydney. John, are you there?
I'm here, Mayor Byrne. Thank you, Mayor Byrne, for this opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. So good evening, councillors, other attendees. I just wanted to speak in support of this motion. My name is John Engler. I'm the CEO of Shelter New South Wales and very pleased to be supporting it. So Shelter New South Wales advocates for the interest of people who are disadvantaged in the housing market, and we help build capacity through relationships with not-for-profit providers to ensure more housing. That definition comes from the Inner West Council's own website, so I'm very pleased to repeat that as our starting point. The main thing we just wanted to talk about this evening is that, sorry, and I must acknowledge, apologies, the traditional owners of the land in which I'm coming to you from, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The main point that we wanted to make tonight is that there are three aspects to the motion. The first one, that councils themselves need to do an audit of available lands and opportunities. We have, in the second part of the motion, the opportunity to help formalise the contribution scheme that could be made. But also I think it's really important to say council, and particularly the Inner West Council, many people across the country think about the Inner West Council as being the leaders when it comes to these type of areas of innovation. Not to wait until the state planning instrument compels you, but to do it of your own volition, to lean in and actually take leadership when it comes to these things. So the idea of being able to do an audit of available lands that could be used to help contribute voluntarily to affordable housing is something worth looking at. And then in addition to that, of course, the support of the contribution scheme through the planning system. I might take this opportunity to draw the distinction between social housing or public housing and that which we think of as affordable housing. So following on from Ben's great observations there, and in fact, Ben himself as a firefighter represents the type of people we want to make sure continue to live and work in the one community. We think about fly in and fly out when it comes to regional towns. We know how devastating that can be for communities. We don't want the same thing to happen in the Inner West. We want the people who live and work in the communities. And by affordable housing for key workers, we often mean, COVID has taught us this, the caretakers, the cleaners and the aged care workers who need to live and work in the community to make it viable. It's a different concept to social housing. We believe the state government has a key responsibility there, but giving people a discount to market, say 75% of what the market rent would otherwise be, they pay 75%, is what good leading councils should do across the country. And indeed, already building on the strong work that's already started around the Marrickville Old Hospital site, I know that the Hay Street car park is being developed. And indeed, along with Sydney Alliance, we were very much in support of the Illawarra Road Marrickville development by Fresh Hope, just as an example of where it's not the same as a normal development. It's managed by a community housing organisation. you as council are able to lean in. And if I use the example of the City of Sydney, just in my last few minutes, they helped St George Community Housing develop 160 units in Gibbon Street, Redfern. Yes, they provided a discount to the land, but they also got to shape the program. They got to shape the policy. They got to support the particular tenants going in there. It's very much what council should be doing, and very much in support of the motion. Finally, there will be additional opportunities, which is the third part of the motion. You do need to be able to scan the opportunity and the environment to see what else is coming up. So all three we're happy to support. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thanks very much, John. The next item we have registered speakers for is item 14, and the speaker is Jodie Toomey of Dulwich Hill. Jodie, are you still there? No, don't seem to have Jodie at this time. We'll move on to the next item and come back to Jodie in a moment. Item 15, notice of motion, Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatic Centres. Just before I go to the registered speakers, I'll note that there has been some commentary in the public domain which could be interpreted as criticism of council officers, and that it is not in accordance with the Code of Meeting Practice for registered speakers to make criticisms of council staff during their contributions. I'll go firstly to Dominic Thomas of Dulwich Hill.
Hi everybody, my name's Dominic Thomas and I've been a casual learner swim instructor for over 4 years at Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatic Centres under Belgravia Leisure. As a representative of my workplace, I've been at the forefront of trying to improve conditions and services for staff in the community. And I'm here to express the urgent concerns of our workplace regarding the transition to in-house employment. Employment under Belgravia Leisure was characterised by insecurity, lack of safety, understaffing, bullying, and gaslighting. Staff have been enduring horrible treatment and conditions from Belgravia for years. Constant underpayment issues, underinvestment into the facilities, understaffing have led to such a high turnover rate that I'm the third longest serving staff member at the centre. We actually got given these new uniforms that say Inner West on them about 2 years ago, still with the same low pay as before, but the work has stayed on with the hope that once council takes over, things will get better. After all this time, to not commit to even offering us positions before the general public is a complete slap in the face to all the workers at the centre and the tight-knit Inner West community that supports them. This transition must be just, ensuring that all workers who want to continue to be employed at the Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatic Centres be offered a position. We are certainly all qualified to run the pool effectively, as some have been doing so for years and are well loved by the centre's members. Furthermore, being constantly short-staffed and with a pool worker shortage, I don't see why aquatics management wouldn't like to keep as many staff as they can get their hands on, unless they're planning to cut services to the community. Following standard hiring practices shouldn't be used to attack our job security, especially given this isn't at all a standard hiring situation. Given the strong community support the centre's workers received during the lockdown, with over 1,000 signatures in support of our petition, it would be disappointing for the community if Inner West Council decide not to pursue a just transition. If council is willing to recognise that the way Belgravia conduct themselves towards their staff hasn't aligned with their values, then I would hesitate to call this direction from aquatics management much of a change. I support the motion by Councillor Griffiths to recognise all previous service of current staff and that staff be given a clear outline of the transition process and how that would affect their future employment, as well as ask council to pursue a just transition for all current staff at both centres. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Just before I go to the next speaker, under the Code of Meeting Practice, I am able to go to council officers to seek clarification. We've had one meeting of this council in which the issue of Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack has not been discussed or tabled on the agenda. It's a resolution of the last council that would bring the services back in-house. There's a number of at least pointed points that have been made in that contribution, if not accusations, but we haven't actually received any recommendation from council staff. So I'd just, in fairness, like to go to the General Manager momentarily to just ask him to outline for us what process is underway for councillors to be informed of the issue and whether any recommendation has been made as yet to councillors about how the transition will take place.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we'll be coming back. We said we would brief and come back to the council to tell them how to do it, to how the process is going to happen. We've got a process already outlined in where we're going to call for expressions of interest across all the staff. We're just working out the details of how that's going to work. I've got some details. I can come back and talk to the councillors about that.
Do you have a timeline for when that will be considered at council, Peter?
Yeah, it'd be the next meeting.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that was resolved previously. So,
yep, that's right.
Without wanting to be a pedant, I'll just ask the last speaker that we have registered for this item to specifically refrain from any criticism or accusations against council officers who've made no report to council about this at all so far. That person is Adam Tanazefti of Croydon. Adam, are you there?
I am.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. My name's Adam Tanazefti. I'm a part-time lifeguard at Annette Kellerman and a Fanny Durack Aquatic Centre, and I've worked there for over a year. I'm in favour for Inner West Council taking these facilities back in-house, if that means bringing all staff in with them. This transition needs to prioritise workers by guaranteeing jobs for all current Belgravia staff that wish to continue work at these centres. Part-time and full-time staff must also remain after the transition and are not to be offered the instability and unreliability of a casual contract. No worker should be left behind as a result of this transition, which may happen if we are made to reapply and compete with the general public for the job that we've been doing for months, if not years. So I request that Inner West Council support a transition that is fair and guarantees jobs for all staff. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Adam. The next item for which there is a registered speaker is item 16, and that speaker is Mark Skelsey of Dulwich Hill. Mark, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, hello. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council on the important issue of the pedestrian level crossing outside Dulwich Hill Railway Station. I speak in support of the motion by Councillor Griffiths. It's widely known that this crossing is and has been for many years a dangerous pedestrian accident black spot. I'm a commuter at Dulwich Hill Station, along with someone who regularly walks to the Dulwich Hill Station shops. Because of its poor visibility, its high traffic volumes and location on the crest of a hill, I've never felt safe using the crossing, and I know most residents feel the same way. In fact, many residents have reported near misses and even being hit by cars. After a reference to this precinct in a recent traffic committee agenda, I contacted the council's traffic officer to ask for an update on the crossing upgrade. I was surprised to learn it was funded and council approved, but awaiting Transport for New South Wales final sign-off, and that the delivery of the works had been delayed. 2 weeks ago, I started an online petition seeking signatures, I should say, to get these works signed off and underway. As of today, some 150 people have signed the petition. Interestingly, a number of people who've signed the petition are not pedestrians, but motorists who say they also hate the crossing because they feel they are at risk of hitting a pedestrian. I know that already Joe Halen MP has written to the responsible state minister on this issue, and I thank councillors Howard, Darienzo and Drury for helping to organise this. However, I think it is important that the council also has a clear voice on this issue via tonight's motion, and also advocates for a quick and positive decision on these works. Given the council traffic officer told me that other important road safety works were also being held up across the council area, it would also be good to get a report to shine a light on what these works are. And I thank you for letting me address the council on this matter.
Thanks very much, Mark. Now, Alice Kershaw has been brought into the meeting via phone through Catherine, one of the officers. So, Catherine, are you able to put Miss Kershaw on the line?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Alice, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak in support of item number 17, which is about the demerger of the council into the 3 old municipalities. I am now virtually housebound because I have pulmonary hypertension due to scleroderma, and I'm on continuous oxygen. I find it very difficult to get out. What I would like to say is this in support of the motion is this. Since the merger, Council has an outlook of pleasant circuses to services. Instead of having people having festivals and stuff, you've neglected the day-to-day housekeeping tasks of keeping drains cleared of clogs so that they don't flood, sweeping roads and other essential services. I have found that councillors from other wards do not have a good understanding of those issues, whereas the councillors from Balmain understand completely about what's happening in our ward because they live there and they're local people. The services in my ward have also declined. I have had to do a lot of my contact with council via phone and email. Council's officers have never bothered to either ring me back or send me an email saying where my request is at. I get, when I ring up, a very nice people on the front desk. However, when I'm put through to the person's phone that's got the carriage of the matter, they're never there, and I leave a message, which is never answered. As well as that, the street sweeping around where I live, and also the hot water spraying of the weeds that grow up in the 100-year-plus curbs used to be done on a regular basis. Now they may be whippersnipped 2 or 3 times a year. And lately, I've had to pull them up myself. If we have a business case and to demerge, we need to have a timeline so that we know that people of the council area know what is happening. You need to have, say, in 6 to 8 months, the business case made and presented to the inhabitants of the council area.
I'll ask you to conclude your remarks.
Including translations for those people who don't have English as their first language. I would also like to have a guideline as to when this is prepared, how you're going to present it to the minister.
Ms. Kershaw, I'll ask you to conclude your remarks. Your time has expired.
So I just would like to say I support the demerging motion, but we need a guideline of the time to see how fast it can be done.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kershaw. The last item for which we have, thanks very much, Ms. Kershaw. The last item for which we have registered speakers is item 20. Now, excuse me, Mr. Sabri, I know you identified before who would be speaking in what order, but I'll go back to you to confirm that because I didn't make a note of it.
Thank you. The first speaker from our group will be Yana.
Okay, thanks very much. Yana, are you there?
I am, yes.
Thanks very much. We can hear you.
Thank you. So it's 2022 and I sit here tonight on unceded Gadigal land watching parts of my country drown under meters of water and watching countries overseas drown under the weight of oppressive regimes and wars. And I sit here asking for the bare minimum, asking for equity, visibility, and equal participation, asking for action on racism. I want to start by highlighting the amazing work that has already been done and note the success of the Racism Not Welcome campaign. I work at the Addison Road Community Organisation and work closely on the campaign, so I see firsthand the impact of it. We hear a lot of stories of people feeling really empowered and validated when they see the signs, but positive or negative response aside, they've been stimulating desperately needed conversations about racism in the community. Conversations that we can't shy away from anymore. These conversations are important, and it's dire that we do not let this momentum fade. We need to continue on and develop a strategy to directly address and unpack the issue that we historically have been too scared to tackle head on. Inner West Council is a true leader in this space already and really played a pivotal role in the inception of the campaign, but we know that more targeted and ongoing work needs to be done. Your community is crying out for a strategy to be developed, to find creative and strategic ways to bring people together to build a coalition of consciousness. By supporting this motion, Inner West Council can really represent their community's values and continue to proclaim loudly against division and discrimination, because work and action in this space is urgent. Recently, we had Cumberland Council deny the motion to put up the signs, and Wallara Council want to take them down. Some members of the community feeling uncomfortable about having these conversations and seeing the signs, like the signs are accusing them of being racist, but the signs are not a call out, they're a call in. They say, come and join us, let's get comfortable with being uncomfortable and be part of the collective action that comes next. And for us to effectively and efficiently move forward, we need a strategy. We need a guide that takes us further and helps us target and dismantle the structures that perpetuate racism. So let's stop with the band-aids and get to fixing the core issue. And councillors, I urge you to please help us do that by supporting this motion tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
That was very well spoken. Thanks very much. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you in the future. So, Mr. Sodbury, were you next, or is Queen Cabone coming next?
It's Queen next.
Just warn you that I've heard her speak before, and she's a hard act to follow. So if that's what you've agreed to, fair enough. But it's usually a recipe for being not remembered very well. Queen G, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Hello, Darcy, and all the councillors who are on today. And a shout out to Matt Howard, who's put the motion forward.
Just before you begin, Queen, I just wanted to say we're definitely having you as the MC for International Women's Day next year when we recommence our celebration.
Getting ready to get back to my traditional yearly International Women's Day. So it's great to see the images projected on the town hall. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the Gadigal people. Sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'm a resident of the Inner West. I'm a director at Addie Road Community Centre and a program manager at the Red Rattler Theatre, and I'm a hip hop artist. It's very significant to support the motion on this day, International Women's Day 2022. Given the current global situation, I'd like to acknowledge the global resistance of all women committed to dismantling the systems of racism that still have a stronghold in our communities. The anti-racism strategy is for the silent voices that don't stop or stand up and defend themselves when faced with racism or have to tolerate it in order to feed themselves, their families, pay the bills, and support their loved ones. The anti-racism strategy is for 2 young girls who've been spat on and married for wearing a hijab. The anti-racism strategy is for the anti-Asian, anti-African, anti-Muslim, anti-anything that's not white violence that is committed on citizens daily. The anti-racism strategy is for the racial profiling from police, where I've been followed to my home, to my apartment, down my driveway during lockdown because I dropped my friend who's Indigenous First Nations to her home, and I was told I was being followed because I was on a street of concern at 10 o'clock in the morning. The anti-racism strategy is to build on the support and the positive outcomes of the Racism Not Welcome signs that have received, really good stories, but we've seen that racism still exists, and the strategy will take it further. It shows that people are still not ready to talk about racism, so this is very urgent. The Racism Not Welcome signs were never intended to stop or fix racism, as some who oppose them have assumed, but the signs are signaling and starting a conversation that we see that the Inner West Council's racism strategy, anti-racism strategy, will be a guide that will take us further and help us to dismantle the structures. The strategy needs to be driven by the community, by those with lived experiences, by those whose people this land we are on, the First Nations people, the Indigenous Black people of these lands, those who have platformed the movements, those who have lived to tell the stories of segregation, the grassroots people who are in it for real and not in it to get a pat on the back just to say that they're not racist. The resources must be provided because for too long we stand up, we speak up, and we stay poor. We'll not be ignored anymore, and we will not be your token anymore. So I want to finish there to say that the Inner West Council's anti-racism strategy should be supported. Thank you. Pass it to Wael.
Wael Sabri, good luck following up from that, brother.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. It is a hard act to follow. To start with, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous population and people in the Inner West and all over Australia for having me in their country. And I totally acknowledge and agree with Queen. This land was, is, and will always be an Aboriginal land. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge the Inner West Council for all their progressive stance in so many issues. And I would like to thank all the participants tonight. Having said that, I think my colleagues and friends have said a lot about racism. Racism can divide, can create conflicts, can create ills, so many social ills. So we want to actually do something about this. And I'll urge the council to actually be the leader to do this. I would like to acknowledge Councillor Matthew Howard for actually bringing this motion here tonight. And I'm totally for it. Why? Why do we want to live?
Just lost you momentarily, Mr. Sabri.
No, I'm with you. I got a bit emotional.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you.
This is not an
act. Forgive me for this. Yes, racism is the cause of not just social ills and divisions. Racism can cause wars, as we can see. And yes, all of us, we have a duty of care. We do have that. And forgive my tears. I don't feel shame about that. It is an expression of my emotions. We have a duty of care to look after. Yes, we do. So what do I would like from the council? Really specific here, Mayor. We want to develop a strategy, a very clear strategy, how to tackle this anti-racism in our society, in our community, in the Inner West to start with. Develop that in partnership, a true partnership with grassroots community organizations, such as the Inner West Multicultural Network, such as Multicultural Advisory Group for the Council, and the list goes on. Support the Council by the Community Development Team, which you have, they are wonderful workers there, to work with this organization to develop the strategy and to do the implementation, have the KPI really clearly, provide the proper funding to do this. This issue is deep and we need to do something about it, not tomorrow, but now. And thank you for your time. And I really appreciate it if something can happen with your support. We need that urgently. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Sabri, and to all of the speakers tonight, and no need to apologise at all for being passionate about our duty of care to all of the citizens here in the Inner West and across Australia. Thanks very much. That was very well said. Councillors, that concludes the public forum, which will bring us to the agenda. The first Now, have we had disclosures of interest? We have already, haven't we? Yep, just double checking. Brings us to the first of 3 mayoral minutes. I'll be as succinct as I possibly can on each of these items. The first mayoral minute is in relation to our flood response, seeking that we express our gratitude and thanks to the SES and the police and the council officers who've all done an excellent job in protecting the community over recent days as we've been experiencing this very unusual event. Also that we get an immediate written update or an urgent written update for councillors about what we're doing, what we're planning to do in the days ahead to assist with the recovery, noting that things are pretty bad at the moment, not as bad in the inner west as they are in other parts of Sydney, but they could get worse. So we do need to be organised and on the front foot in making sure that we're being responsive to the community. Also that we get in contact with all of the affected councils in the northern area of New South Wales who've been affected by the disaster. I won't speak at length about the shocking scenes that we've all seen on our television screens over the last week, but I'm sure I speak for everyone in saying that we want to do everything we possibly can to assist those communities. There's very long-standing links between the inner west and lots of places in northern New South Wales. And we do have a good record of having done that previously in the response to the fires, where council staff did an excellent job on the South Coast in assisting with the expediting of development, assessment and other services. And lastly, that we write to both the state and federal governments seeking a commitment from them to fund the flood mitigation strategies, which our council and other councils across the state and the nation have developed. It's a statutory obligation that we hold, which has been undertaken diligently. The works contained in those plans in every local government area add up to hundreds of millions of dollars, well beyond the capacity of local governments by themselves to pay for. And I think there's a growing recognition across New South Wales and Queensland at the moment that this is something that should have been a higher priority for investment from state and federal governments before now. So I'll put that. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this important mayoral minute. I just wanted to briefly address it. So, look, it's been a really anxious week for people across the inner west and across New South Wales. In the Marrickville-Midgebury ward, residents, businesses, community organisations are still sandbagging and mopping up, only to find more water lapping at their doorsteps as the next storm hits. So, look, it's been dispiriting. It's emotionally draining. It can feel relentless. I was up responding to anxious residents all night and throughout the day. We know the challenges our communities are facing locally, that they pale in comparison to what we've seen over the past week in the Northern Rivers and across the state. Our hearts are broken at the images of destroyed homes and businesses in Lismore and the tragic loss of life. I thank the Mayor for offering, on behalf of our local community, support for these flood-affected communities. Back here at home, while this is far from the worst flooding our community has witnessed, for affected residents, it's deeply frustrating and it's frightening. However, we people of Marrickville, St Peters, Sydenham and Tempe are resilient. We're also realists, and we know that these are complex and enduring problems. We know we need long-term investment to resolve the issues of local flooding, particularly as we see more and more extreme weather events because of climate change. I strongly support the call for an urgent briefing on Council's response, and I wholeheartedly support the call for state and federal governments to step up and directly fund local communities to do the work of mitigating floods. Thank you to the extraordinary SES volunteers, both at the Marrickville and Asheville Leichhardt units, who've been working often throughout the night and in extremely dangerous circumstances to keep our community safe and dry. Thank you to the frontline emergency workers from police, fire and ambulance. And thank you, sincere thank you to the council staff who've been working to fill and deliver sandbags, clean drains and clear debris. When I've been speaking with the Marrickville SES, they have said that the work that council has done to support the SES has just been extraordinary. And I think staff should be extremely proud of that work. Our community will get through this, and I will continue to work closely with and support local residents who've reached out over the past week. I commend the motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Howard. Is there any other speaker to the motion? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Brings us to the second mayoral minute, which is in regards to the Inner West Arts and Music Crisis Summit. Councillors, I've detailed in the background to this motion the circumstances that you'll all be aware of already. There's a very serious problem in the Inner West arts and music sector as a result of 2 years of pandemic and economic crisis, in which it's been very difficult to hold artistic events of any kind. There's been no certainty about what the future is for individual businesses, and therefore it's been very difficult to plan or to invest in future artistic activity. And that has resulted in a lot of people having to leave the sector to find employment and an income somewhere else. We know that this is a really important challenge for the Australian society, because the arts are so important to our identity and to our national economy. That's been underestimated, of course, by state and federal governments throughout the pandemic. But also for us in the Inner West, it's really crucial, because we do have more people working in artistic industries than any other community in Australia. So we do need to take a leadership role, and I'm proposing that we convene a summit in conjunction with the Sydney Fringe Festival, highly respected peak body for the art sector in Sydney, which is experienced in dealing directly with working artists, and also the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, which is the union representing people working in the arts sector, and which has a high density here in the Inner West of Sydney. I'm also proposing that we invite everyone we can get there: the state government, the responsible ministers, all of our state MPs, federal MPs as well, and all of the peak bodies representing the arts sector. The more people we can get in the room willing to contribute to getting the Inner West arts scene back on its feet, the better. So I'll move that way and open it to discussion from any other councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I'm proud to lend my support to this motion, and I thank Mayor Byrne for bringing it to Council tonight. Here in the Inner West, we are rightfully proud of our very vibrant music and arts scene, which has long been a drawcard for residents and visitors alike, and also a launch pad for some of Australia's most talented artists and musicians. It's also a sector, as Mayor Byrne said, which is critical to our economy, supporting hundreds, if not thousands of jobs in other industries across the Inner West and beyond. But unfortunately, it's not hyperbolic to say that the industry finds itself in a state of crisis. And as we meet tonight, I'm mindful that it's almost 2 years to the day since New South Wales entered its first lockdown of the COVID pandemic. Since March 2020, we have seen mass cancellations of music and cultural events, decline in patronage, and an estimated loss of $330 million in arts and music contracts and income Australia-wide. You don't have to look far to see the impacts of COVID firsthand here in Sydney, with iconic music and cultural institutions, including the Old 505, Giant Dwarf Theatre and the Lansdowne, all forced to close their doors just last month. Meanwhile, we know that untold numbers of performing artists have had to abandon their careers to pursue a more secure income elsewhere, while others struggle to find creative and performance spaces in an increasingly unaffordable rental market that hasn't been forgiving to the financial impacts of COVID. Without the immediate and ongoing targeted support that the sector needs, arts and music in the Inner West as we know it will disappear. An Inner West Arts and Music Crisis Summit will bring together key stakeholders and decision makers at a local, state and national level to identify the immediate challenges facing the sector and galvanise action on the short and long-term solutions and support. While we at a council level can't resolve every problem which faces the industry, it is incumbent on us to play a leadership role, to advocate for the sector which contributes so much to our community, and to work with governments, industry and artists to recover and revitalise arts and culture in the Inner West before it's too late. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Smith. Councillor Atkins and Councillor De Cruz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak in support of this as well. We all know that so many local artists, creative businesses and other members of the arts and creative industries have suffered badly under COVID, and indeed are being affected by the current weather as well. We've got the festival, which has had to be cancelled this weekend. I think it's really important to bring together all levels of government with local artists, businesses and supporters to find solutions. Artists and creatives are crying out for people to talk to them to help find solutions. I don't think individual councillors are able to do that, and I think this is an excellent way of bringing people together, and I fully support it.
Thanks very much, Councillor Atkins. Councillor De Cruz.
Yes, Councillor Mr. Mayor, thank you for bringing this motion. It's a wonderful way to bring our community together in such unfortunate and such difficult circumstances as the COVID pandemic has led to. I mean, we have an extremely resilient community and who wants to bounce back and build up even better than they did before with the experience of COVID behind them. And I think it'd be very worthwhile to have such a forum. I would hope that you could just add a slight amendment, and you might actually feel it's implicit in the motion, but I've sent it to Catherine, and it's to actually invite all councillors to attend such a summit. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor De Cruz. Happy to incorporate that. Certainly was my intention in the drafting of the motion. Is there any further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried unanimously. Just to confirm, is there anyone against the motion? No, very good. We'll move on to the last mayoral minute, which is in regards to the Auditor General's findings about the New South Wales government's conducting of grants programs, and specifically the Stronger Communities Fund. Councillors, I'm sure, will all be aware already of this issue. It was a major consideration for the last council once we discovered that we had been improperly prevented from applying for funds from the Stronger Communities program. I made the referral to the Auditor General for investigation of this program through the Shadow Minister for Local Government. We know also that the ICAC is still investigating the awarding of $90 million from that fund to Hornsby Council, led by the New South Wales Liberal Party President, Philip Ruddock. I understand that Mr Ruddock himself is not under investigation. It is the process by which the grant was awarded. In short, a $252 million fund that was established to support forcibly amalgamated councils such as our own was morphed very deliberately into a slush fund to create an electoral fund that could be used by the Liberal and National parties in the lead up to the 2019 election. The Auditor General has confirmed that 96% of that $250 million was awarded to Liberal and National Party electorates in what amounts to plainly speaking, one of the biggest rorts in the history of New South Wales. We know from the various parliamentary inquiries that have taken place that the then Premier and Deputy Premier were right at the centre of the scheme and in fact secretly approved hundreds of millions of dollars in expenditure, and that the documentation used for that process was subsequently shredded in many instances in the Premier's office. The Inner West would have received $24 million in funding if those funds had been distributed fairly on a per capita basis. And that's a reasonable request for us to make now, given the gross impropriety that's been revealed, that those funds should be, we should be compensated, or more to the point, the people that we represent should be compensated. It shouldn't matter whether you live in a Liberal electorate or a Labor electorate, independent, Green, National. You're meant to get fair and transparent governance from the Premier, from the Government of New South Wales. This really blatant and toxic partisanship is not okay, and it does need to end. The really concerning thing from my perspective is that we've received no apology, no acknowledgement, no comment at all from the Premier to suggest that we'll be treated more fairly in the future. In fact, within a fortnight of the, or 3 weeks of the Auditor General's findings, the Premier and the government have announced a new scheme, a $5 billion grant scheme called West Invest, which is funded from the sale of WestConnex. And guess what? The only council west of the CBD, the only council between the CBD and the Blue Mountains that has been excluded from applying for funds is the Inner West Council, the one place where WestConnex has actually had the largest impact by far in terms of construction on people's environment and quality of life. This is really very petty and exclusionary and quite obvious. So I think we should also be calling to be for the government to include us and allow us to apply for funds from that scheme. So it's not 2 in a row in which we've missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars that we should have been able to access like other communities across the state. So I'll table that and I'll move that way and I'll open it to discussion from other councillors. Councillor Drury.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing forward this mayoral minute. Look, I think everyone in Sydney's a little bit used to some colourful antics out of Macquarie Street. That's what happens there. But this is a new level of outrageousness in relation to the Stronger Communities Fund. The fact that the Premier and the Deputy Premier were so involved in such a rort, and the Deputy Premier and the Premier sought to laugh it off as just, that's the way politics happens, was outrageous. Even by the standards of Macquarie Street and New South Wales, it was outrageous. And now to have this squeaky clean new Premier come in and say, you know, that wasn't so flash, but to have a new round of funding in relation to WestConnex and once again exclude us on fairly spurious grounds starts to look like a pattern of behaviour that I think justifies us voting out that government.
Thanks very much, Councillor Drury. Further discussion, councillors?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Stanless.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose a point 4 to take a slightly different approach to this. The issues you've mentioned above, of course, are essentially correct, but in some sense they are confrontational. If you want to engage with the state government and seek additional funds, then I'm suggesting we take a slightly different approach. We have employed, over the last 2 years, we've employed a QC to investigate the $250 million of funds. We've been unsuccessful there. We're looking at the definition of the, in point 2 of the West Invest project. And of course, the government will throw back at us and say this is defined for certain councils. We don't want to get into that, debate with state government. What we do want them to do is understand that we were never sufficiently funded for the merger, and that our council would be prepared to put a proposal forward in good faith, itemise some of the key elements of that proposal, and seek a response from the Premier and the Minister of Local Government. That is, we genuinely go forward rather than debate them on their funds and funding opportunities, and also the outcome in terms of the improper allocation of those funds. That's certainly been very, very well and truly aired in the public, and I think the public are fully aware of that. But I think it's incumbent upon our council now to put something forward, get it before the Premier and the Minister, and certainly say that this merger was never, ever appropriately funded. Thank you.
So, Councillor Stanless, can I clarify, are you seeking to delete points from the primary motion or to add an additional point?
Simply amend that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, that doesn't answer the question. Is your amendment to delete points or to incorporate an additional point?
To incorporate the additional point, thanks.
Okay, happy to incorporate that. Thanks very much. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor de Cruz.
Yes, thank you for bringing this motion on our minute to council. I guess the sell-off of WestConnex is even a further slap in the face to our community, torturing them and then building an unsustainable roadway when we need public transport, active transport, several other things, and to focus that money into WestConnex, then to sell it off, and then not to give money back to the community. In fact, I'm not sure that giving the proceeds from the WestConnex will really be welcomed by the community, considering their opposition to the whole project in the first place. And I guess what's most galling about the $90 million is it went to purchase clean landfills from WestConnex. So, I mean, I think our community is really and truly being dudded by the state government, as you pointed out, and I welcome you questioning and continuing to attack them on this matter. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor de Cruz. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anyone against? That's been carried unanimously. That brings us to the substantive agenda. Councillor Scott?
Yes, I would like to put a procedural motion, please, that we consider a number of items in globo. I've provided language to the minute taker earlier, and I believe that it is items 1, 6, 8 and 10. The minute taker, yes, to delete item 4, 1, 6, 8 and 10. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So just for confirmation, we've got a procedural motion that items 1, 6, 8 and 10 be moved in globo, and the recommendations contained within the report adopted, and that council change the order of business to bring forward these items. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Griffiths. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it? If not,
Mr. Mayor?
I'll put that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Stanless.
I believe that the Code of Meeting Practice makes it very clear that if councillors wish to speak on an item, that item should be available for them to speak to. So I would certainly like to speak to item 6. Thank you.
Okay, we'll remove item 6 at Councillor Stamoulis's insistence. Is there any other councillor who'd like to speak?
Yeah, look, I might just add, I don't think we can move a notice of motion in globo, even though it was an alternative to a rescission motion, but I think we're not permitted to move a notice of motion in globo.
I'll put that as a question to the Manager of Governance.
Thank you, Mayor Darcy. There is nothing that precludes council moving a notice of motion in globo. It's allowed.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, that's been confirmed. I'll now put the motion which sees the adoption of items 1, 8 and 10. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anyone against that? No, that's been carried. So item 1 is dealt with, which brings us to item 2, Code of Meeting Practice. Councillor Scott?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move an amendment to item 2, please. Language as provided to the minute taker earlier, if it could be shown on the screen, please.
Thank you. We can now see that.
Thank you. The amendments before you are to amend clauses 5.28 to add an additional clause 9.19 and amend clause 10.22. Can I ask for clarification from the Manager of Governance through you, Mr. Mayor, if I need to read these out?
I would suggest that it would be best that you did, given the specific nature of the amendments.
Happy to do that. The amendment is to place the draft Code of Meeting Practice on public exhibition for 28 days, subject to amending the following clauses. Amend clause 5.28. A councillor must give their full attention to the business and proceedings of the meeting when attending a meeting by audio-visual link. the councillor's camera must be on at all times during the meeting, except where it is impractical to do so, or as may otherwise be provided under this code. B, include an additional clause 9.19. A councillor may ask up to 3 questions per item on the agenda. And amend clause 10.22. A councillor must not, without the consent of the council, speak more than once on a motion or an amendment, or for longer than 2 minutes at any one time.
Thank you for that. Let's just speak to the substance of the amendments, Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you. The amendments before
Can I
you
just
are...
propose that Councillor Scott's time start now rather than when she began reading out the amendments. Thank you.
The amendments before you are designed to facilitate equitable access to meetings by councillors and efficient management of items on the agenda, and are based on advice and conversation with the Office of Local Government and their best practice. I think my colleagues will agree that the burden of having one's camera on all the time is excessive, and that councillors should be able to turn their cameras off while briefly attending to caring responsibilities or necessities like eating or going to the bathroom without being marked absent. Regarding proposed clause 9.19, the model code allows for council to restrict the number of questions asked without notice through the chair to staff, so as to prevent staff from being excessively burdened or harassed from the floor by questions that could have been asked prior to the meeting or statements that are not in fact questions. All councillors have a week to read the papers and clarify matters, ask for a briefing, report or more information beforehand. Performative humiliation of staff wherever it occurs or excessive speech making does not further the objectives of this council to deliver for residents. A limit on the number of questions that need to be asked in public by councillors will focus our minds on those matters that truly need to be put on the public record. A similar foundation is the basis for proposed changes to clause 10.22. Statements of fact, background and support should be able to be delivered by elected officials within 2 minutes. Note that the speaking time for community speakers in the public forum has not been reduced. The objective of council meetings is to make decisions on the business papers of the council that come before it. The obligation of councillors is to come prepared, informed and organised to those meetings. I make a further note that the essential business of this council is the reports, the budget, our strategic plan and major project. It is not the notices of motion put forward by individual councillors from time to time. And so while these updates will allow us the hope of getting through the entire agenda, including everyone's motions, it is the case that we will have executed our duties if we achieve resolution on the papers that speak to strategy, finance, capital project and residents' needs. I commend this motion to council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott. Is there a seconder for that what becomes the primary motion?
I would second that, Mayor Byrne.
Yes,
I have nothing more eloquent to add than what Councillor Scott has contributed. I support the amendment.
Thanks very much. So that we have a primary motion, which is the officer's recommendation with the Scott-Smith amendment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the primary motion?
I have a question,
yes,
Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Griffiths, your question.
Yeah, just to the officers through you. Well, what is the Office of Local Government's best practice for speaking time for councillors?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Thank you, Mayor Byrne and Councillor Griffiths. The Office of Local Government provides very clear mandatory requirements for the Code of Meeting Practice. What it allows councillors flexibility on is the specific time that they identify. They have not suggested otherwise what that timing is to be, other than that decision is a council decision.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor de Cruz.
Thank you for that explanation, Officer. Can you actually ask in regard to B, whether councillors can actually be restricted on asking questions on issues before them at council to fully inform themselves and the public in a public meeting of the issues in that agenda?
I'll put that question to the Manager of Governance.
Thank you, Mayor Byrne, and thank you, Councillor de Cruz. I did raise this directly with the Office of Local Government when it was raised as a potential amendment, and the Office of Local Government specifically said that they believe that as long as the objective was to ensure that the meetings were running effectively and efficiently. They didn't believe that there were any concerns with limiting the questions to 3 questions per item on the agenda, and had no issues with that inclusion in the Code of Meeting Practice.
Thank you very much for that. Further discussion, councillors?
Councillor Byrne.
Sorry, I didn't catch who that was. Councillor Lockie.
Yes. Can I ask, I don't know if this needs to go to you or to Councillor Scott, if we can vote on these items in seriatim, because I'm supportive of the vast majority of it, supportive of the intent of all of it. My concern is with 1C, just because that is quite a change. And I say that as somebody who, as you know, I don't speak on every item or anywhere near it, but it is sometimes quite difficult to explain, to really go into the background of why you may have brought a motion forward or why you want to speak on one of the officers' reports in 2 minutes. And that's quite a substantive change, but I support the rest of it, and I would prefer not to have to vote against the entirety of it.
Thank you. In considering in reading the report and refamiliarising myself with the Code of Meeting Practice, I reviewed the process for requesting that items be dealt with in seriatim, and it does come up frequently. So I might go to the Manager of Governance to outline for all of us what the process is when a councillor requests that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Byrne. So voting on resolution separately is a procedural motion. It is just to vote on the points of a resolution separately, and it can be moved without notice, and it does require a seconder, but it is simply that a councillor will move that they vote on the points of resolution separately. If that is carried by council, each resolution of that motion will be considered separately.
Thanks very much. I'm not sure that we've always dealt with it in the correct way in the past, but we will now. So, Councillor Scott, I'll go to you first. Are you willing to agree to those items being separated out? If not, that procedural motion will be put to a vote.
Happy to accept that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, no problem. All right, well, there's one amendment. We're debating the primary motion, which has been moved by Councillor Scott. She's agreed that items 1A, B and C will be voted on separately. Further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I'll go to Councillor Scott for a right of reply before going to those items.
Waive my right of reply. Thank you, Mayor Byrne. Happy for us to move on to a vote if there's no further discussion.
I would like to speak against the motion.
Okay. All right, I'll go to Councillor Griffiths to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. So one of my concerns with the draft Code of Meeting Practice was that changes would be delegated to the General Manager and would no longer need to go out to public exhibition for further changes. Correct me if I have that wrong, but I believe that was one of the consequences. I believe, like a lot of what was in the Code of Meeting Practice was there, but I do oppose that point.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Scott's already waived her right of reply. We'll go to vote first of all on item 1A, which reads that Council amend clause 5.2A, that councillor must give their full attention to the business and proceedings of the meeting when attending a meeting by audio-visual link. The councillor's camera must be on at all times during the meeting, except where it is impracticable to do so, or as may be otherwise provided for under this code. So that is the amended wording. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anyone against? No. We'll move on to 1B, which reads, include an additional clause 9.19. A councillor may ask up to 3 questions per item on the agenda. I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors Lockie, Howard, Scott, Drury, Smith, Stevens, Sardulius, D'Arienzo, and myself. All those against? Against, I have councillors Stanless, Langford, Atkins, De Cruz, Shetty. That is all. That has been carried. And that brings us to 1C, which reads as follows. The council amend clause 10.22. A councillor to read, a councillor must not, without the consent of the council, speak more than once on a motion or an amendment, or for longer than 2 minutes at any one time. I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors Howard, Scott, Smith, Stevens, Drury, D'Arienzo, Sardulius, and myself. All those against? Against, I have councillors Lockie, Stanless, Atkins, De Cruz, Shetty. That is all. That has been carried. And we'll now also need to move point 2, which I assume will be supported unanimously.
Sorry, Mayor Byrne. Could I move a further amendment to the primary motion, please?
Well, we're voting on the primary motion, which we'd already agreed to separate out. So there's already been Councillor Scott has already waived her right of reply to speak in reply. So technically an amendment should have been moved prior to that, but I'm happy to, with Councillor Scott's concurrence, to go to you to move a further amendment given the confusion earlier. Councillor Scott, you're okay with that?
Happy to do so. Thank you, Councillor Shetty.
Thank you. Councillor Shetty.
Apologies, it wasn't clear when I was supposed to get in there with that one. It was a little bit confusing. I'd just like to move the amendment that clause 4.2 be amended to public forums are to be chaired in accordance with clauses 6.1 and 6.2. That basically just says it's in line with the current code, which the mayor, then the deputy, and then if not, another councillor is elected by the councillors.
Is there confusion about public forums?
Sorry, my microphone was off. Is there a seconder for that?
Happy to second that.
Seconded by Councillor Scott. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Is there any councillor against that? No, that's been carried unanimously as well. That brings us to item 3, National General Assembly of Local Government. Now, councillors, just one moment, Councillor Scott. Councillors, I'll just note that there has been a practice, I'm not sure if this is codified, but there has been a practice of allowing councillors who wish to move a motion at a state or national local government conference to be able to do so, regardless of whether that motion would be supported by a majority of councillors in and of itself. So that is one option that is available to everybody. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move an amendment with language as provided to the minute taker earlier. If
Please
that can be shown on the screen. Thank you so much. I'm amending when it comes on the screen. There we go. Amending item 1, rather than to ask this council to determine, to actually determine that the councillors attending the NGALA in 2022 will be as follows: Councillors Byrne, Drury, Scott, Atkins, De Cruz and Griffiths, although I note that we can take other nominees from the floor. And I would like to amend item 2, rather than to determine which proposed motions we put forward, to actually note that individual council members have submitted on behalf of council motions 1 and 2 as detailed in attachment 4, which was in the papers, and motion 3, which is newly amended and in detail in the words provided on the screen, and support them going to the NGALA. Motion 1 is yes to the circular economy and no to incinerators, which we heard quite a bit about in the public forum, and I believe we've all been fully informed about the benefits of that motion. The Uluru Statement from the Heart, which was unanimously adopted by council at our previous meeting, and again, we had quite a number of speakers on that item. And a third motion put forward by a Croydon resident and environmental activist, Anna Harvey, which many of us know, which proposes that we amend the tax code so as to provide a range of environmental benefits. Now, I can read all of that out. It is long, happy to do so, or it can be available for reading. Advice, please.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott. Well, is there any councillor who wishes Councillor Scott to read that out, or can we have it displayed on the screen? And if I could ask that the minute takers scroll through it. Is everybody happy with that as a process? Excellent. Okay, is there a seconder for the primary motion moved by Councillor Scott? Seconded by Councillor Cruz. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, just briefly to thank the wonderful speakers who came to speak to the circular economy motion in Chris Hansen, Lisa Saunders and Marina Antoniozzi. And I believe that we have wonderful organisations in the West, and we hope that we can support them. And thank you for the other two motions, which are welcome too, being put forward to the national conference as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Is there further discussion?
Councillor Byrne?
Yes, Councillor Lockie.
Can I add myself to the list of attendees, please?
Yes, so just to clarify, and sorry I missed this earlier, Councillor Scott, have you included, you have. So what I might do, just to save a bit of time, Councillor Lockie has been added by the minute takers. Can I ask other councillors who are intending to go to the conference to let us know now so that you can be recorded as one of the approved attendees from council? So far we have myself, Councillor Drury, Councillor Scott, Councillor Atkins, Councillor De Cruz, Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Lockie. Is there anyone else who would like to go to the National Assembly of Local Government? No? Excellent. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Scott for a right of reply.
Waive my right of reply. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody against the motion? No? Very good. That motion has been carried unanimously. That brings us to item 4, Local Traffic Committee, meeting of the 7th of February 2022. Councillor D'Arienzo.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a minor amendment provided to the minute taker.
Yes, please proceed.
Thanks. My amendment is in relation to the Dulwich Hill Station Precinct public domain improvements. I'd like to request that a briefing of ward councillors be held on this project before advertising for the tender, and I'd like to ask for a community meeting including local businesses and residents be held on site before finalising the tender process. I'm pleased that we're nearly ready to go with the tender for stage 1 and 2. I understand that there was a short consultation period that happened last year, but before we finalise the tender, I'd like these two elements to happen.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Will you also move the adoption of the Traffic Committee minutes, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a seconder for that?
Me, thank you, Mayor. Councillor Griffiths. Thanks.
Councillor Griffiths, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thanks.
Okay. There's no further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously, I believe. Is there anybody against the motion? No? Excellent. That's unanimous. Item 5, second quarter budget review. Councillor Drury.
Mayor, may I move the adoption of the recommendation?
You may. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please.
Please proceed.
Firstly, I would like to place on record my thanks to our staff and particularly to Daryl Jackson and Peter Levanis for this report. And what a pleasing report it is to read, because it continues to show the stewardship that we have of the finances of this council. We have been through a fairly torrid time in relation to the COVID. And we took, back in last June, a fairly conservative approach to budgeting. And I think that conservative approach was justified. I note that we've already adopted a report which showed that COVID in the end did not have the massive hit on our budget that it could have and that we feared it would. I'd also note things like we actually had a $1.1 million increase in fees and charges collected, largely because our pools were opened a bit quicker than we thought they would, and because of the little construction boom that occurred in the COVID season. So that is a very pleasing aspect. I think it goes to show that we budgeted fairly well and we're fairly well on track, with a few exceptions. And look, I will express my customary concern in relation to the challenges that we have with delivering our capital project work. That's not to disparage the officers who work so hard to give us the quality facilities and renovations and restorations that we need, but it just shows we've still got work to do in this area. I suppose the bit that I note was the number of projects which were at the stage of the half yearly review were pushed into the next financial years. And that concerns me, and that I think is an ongoing challenge for our council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Drury. Is there a seconder for Councillor Drury's motion to
Yes,
note
Mayor.
the report? Yes, the Deputy Mayor will second that. Any further discussion?
If I might.
Yes, Councillor Dorenzio.
I'd also like to thank the staff who prepared the report and for the efforts of all staff in each service unit who contribute to keeping us in a sound financial position. There are a couple of items that I wanted to note in the primary financial statement, and that is, first, I note that we are forecast to end with a deficit before capital of 6.9 million, which is only 2.5 million more than what we budgeted. And I just wanted to comment that this isn't too bad in the context of an operating budget of with a total of almost 237 million. And I think that with the challenges and the vagaries around COVID last year when the budget was last year when the budget was adopted. I also just wanted to repeat Councillor Drury's comments in relation to capital expenditure. I note that under the Capital Works program, we have only spent 19 million of our 80 million capital budget. Now, I know we have plenty of capital projects that are underway and in the pipeline, and I trust that we will be able to get on and complete those projects before the end of the financial year. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Further discussion?
Yes, I've got an amendment.
Councillor de Cruz.
If Catherine can put it on the screen. I think reading these quarterly reports is difficult. I too thank the officers, and not just the officers, the staff who put the data together to present the reports to us. It's not easy when you're working at the coalface to also present reports to elsewhere so that projects can be monitored, the progress of the council can be monitored, and the funds can be monitored. Councils have huge funds. They have to manage. I mean, we've often been told that perhaps movements in the quarterly budget don't always necessarily reflect a movement in a project. They may reflect just the movement in the payment, but the work is progressing quite differently. So I think there's real challenges in reading this, and tonight we've got before us 3 documents. We've got this document, we've got the 6 monthly report and the audited report into the Dawn Fraser pool. It was actually interesting at the Local Government New South Wales conference that item also did appear on the papers, that better templates need to be developed by the New South Wales Government to present data to councils on their budgets. So I think I'm just noting that comment in regard to this report, that council notes the format of quarterly reports is a work in progress, and following the special conference, Local Government New South Wales is pursuing templates, KPIs for more transparency within the New South Wales Government. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Drury, how do you feel about incorporating that amendment into the primary motion?
I would seek the views of the General Manager before forming a view, Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll put that as a question to the General Manager. Could you please provide any advice that you have about the De Cruz amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, look, I'm quite happy with the amendment from a staff point of view that, any templates and advice from LG New South Wales or the OLG to improve transparency of our budgeting and consistency from council to council would be welcome.
On the basis of that advice, I'll accept it.
Thank you for that. That's incorporated into the primary motion. Is there any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'll go to Councillor Drury for an unnecessary right of reply, which is waived. Excellent. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously, I believe. Is there anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 6, investment report.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Stanless. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lockie. Is there any discussion? If not,
Mr. Mayor, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah, certainly. Councillor Stanless.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, just looking at the list of investments that we have on the book there, I noticed that there's some significant monthly movements. And my very first question of 2 is, are there any limitations on council in terms of a monthly change on our investments? I noticed there, for instance, that Suncorp moved from 41.9 to 55.65, which was quite a significant move. We had the CBA Green move from 69.5 down to 59.5. So in terms of month-to-month movements, are there any restrictions on council, or is it anything allowed? Thank you.
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, it's Darryl Jackson. Good evening. No, there are no restrictions as and when investments mature. So we report them as maturing, and also we try and acquire new investments with those funds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Councillor Stanless, did you have any further questions?
Yes, the second question, looking at the chart below, where we're looking at Inner West Council's investment returns over the past 5 years. There's now a change of sentiment about where interest rates might be heading over the months ahead. My question was, is council's investment portfolio in a sufficient position to be responsive to those interest rate changes so that we do see a benefit to council's overall investment? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we are. Sorry. Through the chair, yes, we are. We're not going for long-term investments with low returns. We're waiting for the change for the turn in the bond market, as I've mentioned before, where we should start seeing some favourable investments to invest in.
Thank you for that. No more questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor De Cruz.
Yeah, look, I think we've got some of the funds, some of the significant funds are the proceeds from the Tempe land. Is there any update on the investment of those in something which might deliver higher returns than the banks to the officers?
Put that question to the officers.
I apologise, wasn't on notice.
Through the chair, at the moment, those funds are invested within our portfolio, investment portfolio. When council has found an investment property that will give the return that we are hoping to get, i.e. replace the investment that we had in Tempe lands, it will be available. Until then, the best thing we can do is what we're doing now, is invest it within non-fossil fuel investment products.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll go to Councillor Stanless for a right of reply.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously, I believe. Is there anyone against? No? Excellent. We'll move on to item 7, Dawn Fraser-Bard's internal audit report. Councillor Drury.
Mayor, may I move the recommendation in an amended form which will appear before you?
Please do.
Essentially, what I am proposing is that we note the report, that we establish a major capital projects committee, and we put in place an external project assurance process. That is the essence of what I am suggesting. So, in response to the audit report, I thank Ernst & Young for the work they've done, and I thank the officers for their responses to what has been suggested could be done better in relation to these capital projects. I will note that Dawn Fraser is a very old pool and is probably one of the last wooden harbour pools in the world. And so there wasn't a lot of expertise in terms of dealing with it, in terms of dealing with the technical aspects of its restoration. However, what it did highlight is some procedural problems that we did have in terms of managing that contract and that project. They have been, as I say, well addressed by the staff in their response. They're very thoughtful responses to what has been raised, and I note that the audit committee had a similar view when it met recently. One of the other matters that was raised at the audit committee was the notion of bringing forward this project assurance role, a role above the project manager and above the contractor, to provide advice in terms of how the project was going in terms of meeting key milestones. And I also, and I think that's a very valuable suggestion to come out of the audit committee, and I've incorporated that notion. Further, I welcome and thank the General Manager for his observation that there was a lack of communication regarding changes to scopes of works and financial impacts regarding major projects. I felt that frustration acutely, as I know a number of other councillors did. And that is the reason behind suggesting we have a major capital projects committee which will consider the progress in relation to major capital projects and give it some oversight. A steering committee on behalf of all of council to try and get things done as close to time and budget as we can.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor
Seconded by
Byrne.
Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it?
I support Councillor Drury's motion and his design for a system of project assurance. The audit report did contain worrying instances where council was not equipped to notice, respond, or communicate critical delays and failures in the project management. I'm sure that the GM and the directors at the time had good intentions and exercised all the diligence they were capable of under the circumstances. But I think it's important that we support our staff and our projects by bringing in an additional layer and extra advice when we can. I commend the motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stanless.
Mr. Mayor, I won't be supporting this motion. And in fact, I'm putting up an alternative proposal that we first seek a briefing from ARIC and Ernst & Young before council makes any decision on this report. This is a very detailed and sophisticated report with a lot of issues within it. And yet I noticed before me an elaborate motion that's already setting up a couple of committees, people on those committees, and a whole way forward. We've only received this very complex report in the last week, and we seem to have resolved the problem. Let's not go too quickly into this. The report has highlighted very, very significant elements for change. And I noticed that council is acting on some of those already, and that's a very positive step. But I would expect the board and the executive body to want to be informed significantly more before we're starting to set up a variety of elaborate committees. It probably solves the political aspect of the problem that people are feeling that we've got an approach, a committee approach. But I think it's a deeper issue than that. There's a lot in this report to digest, to understand, and I think it would be wise for councillors to allow a briefing from ARIC and Ernst & Young to take place before they make such decisions. So my foreshadowed motion is there for councillors to see. Thank you.
Councillor Stanless, can I just seek clarification? I'll ask the minute takers to display the motion on the screen. It reads as follows: that council to receive briefing including from ARIC, Ernst & Young, in order to make future decisions on a way forward. Councillor Stanless, you attended the ARIC meeting last week, which all councillors were invited to attend, in which a detailed briefing was provided by Ernst & Young. ARIC doesn't provide briefings to the whole council, but councillors are all able to attend ARIC meetings. So what is different from the briefing that was provided last week that you are seeking to achieve?
Well, there were 4 councillors, I think, Mr. Mayor, at the ARIC meeting last week. I think all councillors need to be across the detail of this report. In fact, I think the wider community needs to be across the detail of the report. But certainly, before we make decisions such as those above in the primary motion, I think we need to be fully informed as a collective group of councillors from ARIC, Ernst & Young, and the General Manager, of course, and the executive team, before we decide on a way forward. I think that would be the appropriate course because there are many moving elements. It's very complex and a highly sophisticated report, and I don't think that we can come up with the primary motion as such within 1 week.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I don't believe it's a foreshadowed motion. It's an amendment which could happen in conjunction with the primary motion, what has been displayed on the screen. And so I will ask Councillor Drury to consider whether he wishes to incorporate that amendment into his primary motion.
No.
Okay, that is not incorporated into the primary motion. So we're now debating the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Cruz. Yes, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I do.
Please do.
Look, I think I echo Councillor Stanless's concerns with the recommendations moved by Councillor Drury, that we are not in a position to respond and set up appropriate assurance processes. In fact, ARIC didn't make those recommendations about a way forward to improve governance and quality and assurance on projects in future. And I think that is probably a role of ARIC to do that. What's been presented to us is actually just the report of the Internal Audit Committee. I've got my own amendment was going to be along the lines of, was there a similar audit report into the Ashfield Aquatic Centre, into all major projects, or was this an exceptional project that had an audit report? Because I think it would be quite routine to have audit reports into all our major projects. I mean, some of the stuff about no assurance, no reporting is quite astounding, given that we had actually requested many of these things to be in place on the Ashfield Aquatic Centre, and we all continuously asked for reports on that item and were never presented it. So I think it's actually jumping the gun to talk about what you're setting up, what's being proposed ahead of an ARIC actually making a recommendation on better governance of projects moving forward. So look, for that reason, in particular, I think I have concerns with all the points raised in Councillor Drury's amended motion with this. And at this stage, I mean, I might even ask Catherine to put up the amendment that I've put forward on this, and either put that as a separate amendment or combine it.
I'll come back to you about that, Councillor de Cruz, because we're debating the amendment that Councillor Stanless has moved and which you've seconded.
That's okay.
Can I just ask, given this is central to the discussion, because I think there's a little bit of confusion here, could I ask the Manager of Governance to just give a brief outline of the relationship of ARIC to the Council, what consideration ARIC has given to the audit report, and what changes have been made to the ARIC reporting structure to Council in this new term of Council?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Byrne. So in relation to the changes to the ARIC Charter and how they will report, councillors, you'll be aware that all councillors were invited to the ARIC meeting. That's a new process. Councillors are also provided with the reports that are going to the ARIC committee so that you can be fully across what's happening at the ARIC, and you can obviously attend at your own discretion. Those minutes are also going to be extended, and as such, when they come to council, they will include an executive summary of the discussion the ARIC had, as well as the resolution that they will be putting forward. Now, obviously, it's a lot easier for councillors to be able to make a decision when adopting minutes when they've seen the business papers that have gone to a ARIC committee, so you'll now have those. In relation to the role of ARIC, and there is some specifications here because we need to be mindful that ARIC meet 4 times a year, 5 if you include the annual financials that they consider. When these audits come to ARIC, and they are done by our external party, Ernst & Young. Ernst & Young provide not only the findings, but the recommendations of the way forward. It's actually the audit in itself that sets out the recommendations that they're advising council to take in order to fix the problems or the challenges that may have occurred. The ARIC's role is to speak to, obviously, the impacted staff and whether or not those recommendations can be implemented. And as you will identify, management has already confirmed that they will be looking to implement all of the recommendations that came on the back of the Dawn Fraser. It is not for ARIC to then go back to the Ernst & Young and determine which recommendations they believe. They will provide their concerns, if they have any, based on the discussion at ARIC. But as this went through ARIC just recently, they had full support of all of the recommendations that Ernst & Young had put forward for Dawn Fraser, and management have also agreed to implement those recommendations. So it would be odd for ARIC to come and take the role of the external auditor and then provide additional recommendations on top of the auditors, of which we have obviously paid to do that audit, in-depth audit, because they have the knowledge and they have seen more than the ARIC committee members have been able to see. Does that answer all of your questions, Darcy?
I think so. Thanks very much, Bojane.
And Mr. Mayor,
the discussion of the Stanless de Cruz amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stanless.
Question through you, if I could.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like an interpretation as to whether that's an amendment. It's clearly, in my speaking to that foreshadowed motion, it was clearly foreshadowed. It is saying that it is stating that the process above. I'm not supporting the process above.
No, sorry, Councillor Stanless, it doesn't say that. I'll read it out
could I
again.
seek a ruling,
I'm not
please,
responsible.
Mr Mayor, through the General
sorry,
Manager?
Councillor Stanless, I'll ask you to desist. As you know, the Code of Meeting Practice requires that you do so. I'll read this again. It's the second time I've done so. It says that Council to receive a briefing, including from ARIC, Ernst and Young, in order to make future decisions on a way forward. That is not contradictory to the primary motion. I'm not sure what you've got in your mind, but that's not my responsibility. I have to rule on what you've provided to the minute takers as the wording of your amendment. It is not in contravention of the primary motion. Is there any further discussion on the Stanless to Cruz amendment? If not, I'll put that amendment. I'll go to Councillor Stanless first for his right of reply.
Well, Mr Mayor, clearly the motion's saying that councillors need to be informed about the Dawn Fraser report. We need to be informed from ARIC, Ernst & Young, before we make any decisions on a way forward in respect of the primary motion. Now, clearly, I believe that is a foreshadowed motion, but I'm obviously speaking now to an amendment. But I don't believe we can make any decisions on committees that should be set up. There'd be no recommendations for these committees to be set up. We're going blindly. Within 1 week, we are setting up committees, councillors to be on those committees. We are going blindly forward before we are appropriately informed and discuss the report. In addition, I believe that we should have the professionals on hand, that is Ernst & Young, who have written that report, who can give us greater clarity and detail about that. So I prefer this to be foreshadowed, but if it's an amendment, then I'm hoping that councillors support it. Thank you.
Now put that amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have Councillors Griffiths, Atkins, Stanless, De Cruz, Shetty, Langford. All those against? Against, I have Councillors Howard, Scott, Smith, D'Arienzo, Drury, Sardulius, Stevens, and myself. That has been defeated. We'll go back to discussion of the primary motion. Is there any further discussion?
Can I move? Well, I would like to move a procedural motion that those items in the motion get considered individually.
Seriatim.
Seriatim, using the Latin.
Thank you for that. Councillor De Cruz is moving that the items be dealt with separately. Councillor Drury, do you wish to accept that, or should we put that to a vote?
Certainly not. Put it to a vote.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the procedural motion from Councillor De Cruz? If not, that will lapse. Okay, that has lapsed. Is there any further discussion on the primary motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Drury for his right of reply.
Sorry, I have a further.
Sorry about that. Is Councillor Shetty?
Hi, I was just hoping to move a further amendment to the primary motion, and that is to add a point 5. Catherine, if you could bring that up, please. Just that council bring back terms of reference for the Major Capital Projects Committee to the April meeting.
Accept.
That's accepted into the primary motion. Are there any further amendments or anyone who wishes to speak against the primary motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Drury. Councillor.
Hang on, I wish to move an amendment. I think that the Major Projects Committee should be open to more than 5 councillors. And therefore I'm moving an amendment that it is open to more than 5 councillors, and the membership of that committee is obviously covered by the forthcoming tour, but that it's open to all councillors. Thank you.
Councillor De Cruz, have you provided that wording to the minute taker?
Yeah, I will in due course.
Thanks very much for that. I'll just remind councillors, in the interest of efficiency, if you could provide wording of amendments that you're going to move to the minute taker in advance of moving them. As we've seen just a moment ago, there is often confusion between what people speak to and what is actually scribed in an amendment or a motion. It's easy for me to get confused at least. So we'll wait while Councillor De Cruz's amendment is provided to the minute takers.
And I'll second that. Thank you.
There you go. No confusion there. Doesn't even need to see it.
Okay, Kath, I have said that. Can I actually ask a question while
We'll just deal with the amendment firstly, Councillor De Cruz. I'll ask the minute takers to display the amendment on the screen, please. The amendment reads as follows: that the membership of the Major Project Committee be open to all councillors and subject to TOR. The terms of reference. Well, the terms of reference are already referenced in the primary motion, so I think that's redundant.
Mayor, can I put to you that that's not an amendment? That's actually a foreshadowed motion.
So, Councillor Drury has proposed the establishment of a committee, Major Projects Committee, with 5 councillors nominated, who I presume he had consulted prior to nominating them. Councillor De Cruz is proposing that membership of that committee be opened up to all councillors. I'm going to rule that that is not in direct contravention of the primary motion. It is an amendment to change the size of the committee, not a foreshadowed motion which would dispose of the committee. So we've got a seconder for Councillor De Cruz's amendment. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to it? No, we'll put the De Cruz-Stanless amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors Lockie, Griffiths, Atkins, Stanless, Shetty and Langford. All those against, please raise your hands. Against, I have councillors Howard, Scott, Drury, Smith, D'Arienzo, Byrne, Sardulius and Stevens. That has been defeated. We'll go back to the primary motion. We have certainly had 2 speakers for and 2 speakers against the motion. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Drury for a right of reply.
Thank you.
Can I put up one
Sorry,
further
Councillor
amendment?
Cruz, I've closed debate. Councillor Drury, please speak.
Thank you, Mayor. And I must say, I am more than a little annoyed at the suggestion that we couldn't get across the detail provided in the Ernst & Young report, particularly when those who were interested knew that Ernst & Young were going to address the ARIC, and those of us who were able to attended that. I'm also a little frustrated that people have sought to change and amend things on the fly rather than engaging in a good faith discussion in relation to a proposition which was clearly put out and sought for support. What we are seeking to do here is go beyond what is in the Ernst & Young report, picking up one of the issues clearly identified and picked up by members of the AREC. That is, there is a manifest need for us to have a project assurance role in relation to major projects. We need someone to oversee both the contractor and the project management and to provide us with clear advice as to how we're going in terms of meeting the key milestones. That is what I am seeking to do. If you have someone doing this, you need them to report, and you need a body to consider that, to problem solve, and to try and work to get these projects completed as close to time and budget as we can. This is not a complicated idea. This is not a couple of committees. This is a role and a committee in addition to the good work that the staff have put in play, responding to the concerns raised by Ernst & Young. This is on top of this to address the sorts of concerns which were acutely felt by those of us who sat through some of the major projects in the last council. I urge all councillors to support this.
I now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors Lockie, Griffiths, Atkins, Howard, Scott, Drury, Shetty, Smith, D'Arienzo, Langford, Sardulius, Stevens and myself. All those against? Against, I have councillors De Cruz, Stanless. No, just councillor De Cruz and councillor Stanless. That has been carried. Next item. Brings us to council. We've dealt with item 8. It brings us to item 9, six monthly progress report.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll move with an amendment.
Mr. Mayor, may I move that?
Sorry, I had councillor Stevens and then councillor De Cruz. Councillor Stevens, do you wish to move that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please. I move that we note the 6 monthly progress report, and in so doing, I wish to acknowledge publicly the diligent and effective work of council officers in delivering the combined delivery plan and operational plan over the past 6 months. As the report points out, there are a number of key actions in council's delivery and operational plans delivered during this period, and around 90% of the remaining actions remain on track. Highlights for the period between July and December of 2021 included council implementing a range of measures to support the community during the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, through rate relief, the completion of several major infrastructure improvements, including the restoration of the Dawn Fraser Baths, upgrades to Alex Trevelyan Plaza, Balmain Telstra Exchange and Henson Park, the provision of community project grants and the commissioning of major new public artworks. And in this period, I also note council received a number of significant awards, including the new Marrickville Library being a finalist in the World Public Library of the Year competition. So I commend the report and very much thank the council officers for their ongoing work.
Thanks very much, councillor Stevens. Is there a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second.
Do you wish to speak to it, councillor D'Arienzo?
Just briefly, please. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'd also like to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of the council staff. This 6 monthly report demonstrates your hard work and commitment to delivering for our local community, and we say thank you. I note that 189 actions in the plan, of the 189 actions in the plan, a whopping 95.7% are completed or on track. I would like to highlight just a couple that didn't make it to the highlights list, but should be mentioned and pulled out. Specifically, the completion of the Inner West Parks Plan of Management of Master Plans. We all know how important the parks became to us all during lockdowns. And I'd also like to acknowledge the engineering actions that have taken place, the bridge conditions survey, the road asset audit, and other actions that were completed in our resource recovery planning dealing with waste. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Further discussion, councillors?
Yes, look, I've got an amendment to put up, and
Yes,
I think you had me down to speak on this item.
Yes, I do. Councillor de Cruz, move your amendment.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, look, I think that this 6 monthly report is welcome. It's not something we've had before, and it helps to clarify what projects are occurring, what projects that are on the books, and give some transparency of what the budget's allocated to. Again, it reflects a large number of projects that aren't progressing, but also, I guess, some of the other critical areas that it did highlight was the lack of measures or good measures for statistics on how we're progressing towards the strategies that are our ultimate goal for 2036. And so I think that we need to develop those a lot better, and that we also need to make it a better document so that our council, our community can take ownership of this strategic plan, and it's reflected in their goals, and our goals are aligned with their goals, and that they can actually provide feedback, and that it can be amended as it goes along, so that it continues to reflect both the community's changing needs, the environmental changing needs, and other changing circumstances and factors that we need to respond to. It's been relentless. We've had COVID, we've had the floods now that are affecting the Inner West. So I think the resilient community is one that is flexible, is capable, and so I think we need to make sure that a community strategic plan does take our community along with it. And so that's why I'm putting up these two amendments. One is to develop better measures statistics to show progress on the strategies and alignment of the actions with the strategies, and to have better community reporting and consultation with the community on the strategic plan and delivery program to ensure they align with the community's changing needs. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Stanless. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In reading through the document, I found it was very informative, but probably about 25% of it could be weeded out. There are a number of items there that we were saying was on track, but in fact there was no track at all. Possibly, I would recommend that we do get to the essence of what council's achieving in a leaner way than what we're doing in this document. And as I say, going through some of those points and having a look that they are items that are currently ongoing and are currently on track, I think would be useful, and 25% of it, I think, could be weeded out. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stanless. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment. Is everyone clear what we're voting on? The amendment is displayed on the screen, hasn't been incorporated into the primary motion.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question through you on that amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you. May I ask through you, Mayor, for some advice from our General Manager as to what they currently produce and whether they think that this request would assist them with their reporting?
Okay, I'll put that question to the General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it certainly would. The report that you've got now is based on a document that was prepared originally back in 2018, and we're improving that as part of this year's document. I concur and agree. It's a first step preparing this this report and bringing it back based on our current operational plan. And these changes would be a good way. It's consistent with good integrated planning and reporting that we have a look on how we can best track and measure our progress and how we can best make sure that some of the key strategies and projects are clearly articulated with clearer timeframes. So I'd concur with the councillor's comments.
Thanks for that. Given those comments, forgive me, Councillor Stevens, I didn't come to you previously to check whether you're willing to incorporate those amendments into the primary motion. Can I ask if you are?
Look, I'm happy, Mr. Mayor, to accept that amendment. I'd probably prefer improved over better, but apart from that, yes, that's fine.
Well, not all of us are going to be able to compete with you on grammar, I'm afraid, Professor Stevens. Okay, that's incorporated into the primary motion. Is there any further discussion of the substantive motion? No? I'll go to Councillor Stevens for a right of reply.
Look, I wouldn't add much more, Mr. Mayor, other than to say that I personally found the report very useful. I'm sure we can work to improve it further, but let's not be overly critical of the great work that council officers have been doing.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'll now put the primary motion. All those in favour? All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody against the motion? No, that's been carried unanimously. It's 8:58. I'm going to adjourn the council meeting for 10 minutes so that everybody can have a brief break before we conclude the rest of the agenda. The meeting is adjourned for 10 minutes. Okay, councillors, we'll resume the meeting. We're up to item 10, which I believe was moved on block. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you. Item 11, notice of motion, Stanmore Station upgrade.
I move that, Mayor.
Yep. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Atkins?
I do.
Please do.
The Stanmore Station upgrade is, of course, a welcome next step in the accessibility upgrades of stations in the Inner West, and we should congratulate the community who've been vital in making this happen. Transport for New South Wales have recently closed their second round of community consultation. This is a great opportunity to make sure that not only is the station brought into compliance with the Commonwealth and state disability legislation, but that it's done in a way which is safe and in accordance with heritage standards, and which has the least detrimental effect on a significant mature tree, as well as smaller plantings around that tree. As we all know, we can't afford to lose tree canopy in the Inner West, and Transport for New South Wales should be called upon to do its very best to save this tree, or at least to commit to large mature saplings to replace it. Improvements to accessibility are, of course, very welcome, but the design should ensure that it does not also make our underpass more dangerous by allowing space for people to lurk. It also seems a missed opportunity not to build an appropriate canopy over the stairs to platform 3 that become decidedly dangerous when it rains and where it's currently almost impossible to pass safely. And to seek a commitment from Transport for New South Wales to protect the walls along Trafalgar Street from graffiti by including a mural or a wall garden, which I know residents have been seeking for a while. I do have some amendments to the notice of motion as lodged, based on further information provided by a local resident and heritage architect, and which were provided to the minute taker. These reflect, can we put those up, Catherine? These reflect that Stanmore Station is one of only 10 state heritage listed locations in the former Marrickville LGA, and that site-specific, sympathetic architectural engineering form has not been demonstrated in the design recently consulted on. In addition, the changes call for an on-site meeting, a usual part of consultations, I understand, but which has not now been possible due to health and safety concerns arising from COVID that no longer exist. I commend the amended motion to council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Then I'll second that motion if I could.
Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm very happy to second the motion, and I thank Councillor Atkins for bringing it to council tonight. I note that it's taken many years of campaigning by the community and our local representatives to achieve a much needed upgrade of Stanmore Station. And this is in spite of the fact that Stanmore is one of 3 stations in the Inner West that has been ranked in the top 10 stations in need of upgrades by Sydney Trains. Despite this, the New South Wales Liberal government has seemed to be more preoccupied with spending money in Liberal-held seats, such as Epping, the Premier's own seat, which are further down the list of identified need. So it is encouraging to see this upgrade progressing at Stanmore to improve accessibility. And I don't know, perhaps Lewisham Station could be next and they could do something about the flooding while they're at it. That said, the community has identified some concerns with the proposed design from Transport. As outlined in the motion, these include the removal of a mature lily-pilly tree, which has stood at the station for many years, the heritage design of the station, and concerns around the design of the lift entrance and uncovered stairs, which could present safety risks to residents and commuters. These are reasonable concerns that Transport for New South Wales should take into account. As they say, if you're going to do it right the first time. In the context of the upgrade, I also draw attention to the issue of graffiti on the walls of the station on Trafalgar Street, which is understandably a source of great frustration for residents. I note that council staff have already met with Transport on this matter, and while we've seen inertia from Transport to date, the upgrade of the station presents a great opportunity to finally address the issue through the installation of a mural or vertical garden, which would have dual benefits of beautifying the area and helping to deter future vandalism. Stanmore Station is a very frequently used facility, both by commuters and children from local schools who traverse the station underpass and the Trafalgar Street pedestrian crossing on their way to and from school. It is appropriate that Council write to the Department and the Minister for Transport to convey the concerns of the community and seek a revised design which takes these concerns into account and accommodates the community's wishes as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I'll go to Councillor Atkins for a right of reply, but no one's made any comment of disagreement. Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody against? No, excellent. That's unanimous. Next item. Item 12, gender inclusion.
Thank you. I move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please.
Please do.
Today is International Women's Day and Saturday was the final day of the Sydney Mardi Gras Festival. Same-sex marriage has been part of the law in Australia since 2017, and yet we still have members of our parliaments waging a war against LGBTIQ+ rights with a particular focus on gender diverse people. I'm very proud to ask the Inner West Council to pass this motion. I myself came out last year as non-binary. I remember as a 10-year-old questioning whether I was a boy or girl after hearing remarks from other kids. It wasn't something I thought much about over the years because the times and the environment I grew up in didn't encourage such questioning. They barely encouraged questioning my sexuality, and it took me till I was in my 30s to do that. Kids ought to be able to question their gender and sexual identities safely and without us returning to a time when there was some sort of perceived shame about being queer. LGBTIQ teenagers already contemplate suicide at something like 5 times the rate of straight teenagers. As I've said elsewhere, it's really important that anyone with a voice use it to speak out against the current attacks on the LGBTIQ community, and the Inner West has a big voice in the community. The Religious Discrimination Bill in the Federal Parliament is an attack on LGBTIQ people, as well as women and people with a disability, in the guise of protecting people of faith. Put simply, it's bigotry. It may have been referred to a committee, but that doesn't mean it's dead. It's just as likely to be resurrected after the election as not. And let's be frank, that may be the case whoever is Prime Minister. The so-called Save Women's Sport Bill is another example of the bigotry and attacks on transgender and other gender diverse people, which our Prime Minister has openly supported. Happily, the New South Wales Upper House rejected One Nation's Religious Freedoms and Equality Bill on the 23rd of February this year. I note there's a typo in the motion. It should be February 2022. But the government response to the anti-trans parental rights bill, which was due yesterday, has been delayed. New South Wales this week launched the Rainbow Birth Certificate to celebrate the diversity of our community and families. The designer talks about removing gender from the focus of the design, and yet New South Wales is one of only 2 jurisdictions in Australia where in order to change the gender marker on your birth certificate, you must have had sex affirmation surgery. There are many reasons why transgender or gender diverse people may not want to have surgery, and this should be a matter for them. We need to call on the New South Wales government to catch up with the times and remove this requirement. We have a chance here to show our community that we won't stand for bigotry and exclusion or legislation that endangers the health of children and young people. Let's show that progressive local leadership that we aspire to as a council by supporting this motion. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Howard.
I'd like to second the motion and propose some amendments that we've provided some language previously. If we could please see that, and which I've flagged with Councillor Atkins.
Thanks very much. I'll ask the minute takers to display the amendments on the screen.
Thank you, Mayor. And look, I sincerely thank Councillor Atkins for both moving this motion and for sharing your story with us. It takes courage to do that. It takes fortitude to do that. And I'm so grateful to you for entrusting us with your story and your perspective. I'm thankful for you for raising the important issue of rights for transgender and gender diverse people. And I'm very pleased and proud to second the motion. And I move amendments that build upon the original motion to set a clear statement of values from the Inner West Council when it comes to discrimination and to transphobia. I thank Councillor Atkins for being collaborative and collegiate and for our conversations on this important motion. And I thank all the councillors I've had the chance to speak with their considered and thoughtful conversations about this issue. It's clear, I think, that we all share a commitment to a fair, safe, and equal community for all. Let's be clear, trans rights are human rights. Both the motion and the amendments put forward tonight clearly affirm that every single person living in our community has the right to live free from discrimination. They clearly state that as an Inner West community, we should stand firm against any attempt to target, exploit, or entrench discrimination against transgender and gender diverse people, including when those attempts come from our own parliaments. As Councillor Atkins has noted, we know that trans and gender diverse folk experience high rates of suicidality, face greater barriers to accessing healthcare and mental health support, and continue to face prejudice and transphobia in workplaces, schools, sports fields, and across the community. The past few months have been especially difficult for trans and gender diverse communities. And I second this motion because we should never accept attempts to use vulnerable people as political pawns. In addition to sending a strong message around transphobia, these amendments seek to build upon the original motion by focusing on what we can do right here locally and by reframing the motion in the positive, centering the values of inclusivity we stand for and valuing and affirming our commitment to a diverse Inner West community where everyone, including trans and gender diverse people, can flourish and thrive. I again thank Councillor Atkins for their important motion and commend both it and the amendments to councillors.
Thanks very much, Councillor Howard. Further discussion, councillors? I'll just clarify, Councillor Atkins, you're accepting those amendments into the primary motion, are you?
Yes, I am. While I'm disappointed we can't commit to a motion that specifically condemns particular pieces of legislation, I welcome amendments that mean we can all support the motion. I particularly welcome new item 5. I note the Inner West already flies the Pride flag during Mardi Gras and the transgender Pride flag on Transgender Day of Visibility. And I would love to see us committing to holding a ceremony every Transgender Day of Remembrance. I look forward to working with the working group to develop ways to demonstrate our pride in our gender diverse community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Atkins. If there's no further discussion, I think that constituted a right of reply, really. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's...
Sorry, Councillor Burns, sorry, I just have a question about the form that the motion has ended up in.
Okay.
Is Councillor Howard satisfied with that?
Can I ask the minute takers to please display the motion in its entirety on the screen?
Sorry, I think it's no, not exactly. Thank you, Councillor Atkins. So, sorry, my computer has just died with the attachment. Sorry, one moment. I'll just forward this.
So I'd be happy with it in the form it's in, but
yeah, that is. Thank you.
In the spirit of collaboration.
Thanks for that, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Howard.
Yep, I'm just forwarding it. 1 second. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, it's coming right now.
So can I just clarify what you're sending, Councillor Howard, because your amendment was already displayed on the screen.
I think it's combined the two, the original motion and the additional points, but what we're actually doing is replacing points 1 to 4 with a replacement point, combining the original point 2 to 3, etc. So I just sent that to Catherine.
Okay, I'll ask the minute takers to display that amended wording on the screen so that both Councillor Atkins and Councillor Howard can review it, as well as all councillors. Have the minute takers received that wording as yet?
Yes, it's just come through. I'm displaying it now.
Thank you. Is it possible to shrink it to a size where the entirety of the motion is visible on the screen?
So the motion should only be what is there as point 1s to 5. The other points have been incorporated. Yeah.
Councillor Atkins and Councillor Howard, can I confirm that that is the motion that you are moving?
Yes.
Councillor Atkins? Councillor Atkins?
She's saying yes, but I think that...
Sorry,
saying yes,
sorry, I thought I hadn't turned my mute button back on. Yes.
Okay, no problem. I now put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously, I believe. Is there anyone against the motion? That's been carried unanimously. The next item is item 13, Affordable Housing Contribution Scheme.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's motion addresses some humble steps the Inner West Council can take to intervene into the housing affordability crisis. These aren't radical asks. In fact, they've already been floated with councillors, including the Labor councillors, Councillor Lockie, Councillor Stamos, all indicating approval at the Sydney Alliance Forum in November. And I would like to thank Ben from Sydney Alliance who came along to speak tonight, and along with John from Shelton, New South Wales. It's great to have your guidance and support for the Inner West community on this matter. An order of council land would allow us to identify sites which have potential for affordable housing and work with community providers like our current partner, Link Housing, other providers like City West, St. George, perhaps even the cooperative sector via Common Equity. This isn't a new concept. We've worked with Link Housing to redevelop the Hay Street car park for affordable housing. Personally, I think the best partnership is when council retains ownership of the land and the housing, but works with the providers on development and management of the housing. This would mean that the public can hold their council to account on the architectural standards, on the affordability standards, energy efficiency, management, and of course the growth of the stock. So the order is the first natural first step for council to take to truly be a champion of affordable housing in the Inner West. The housing contribution scheme, and but via the state planning policy, allows councils to levy developers and make them pay for affordable housing by contributing a share of their profits when an area is rezoned. Once councils develop an affordable housing contribution scheme, it must be embedded in our local environment plan. And we have a process coming up later this year. It's not currently used in the Inner West. In Green Square, in the City of Sydney, it's been used for some time. In Green Square, developers give around $250 per square metre to go into a trust fund. And we could do similar, where we could put our monies collected and place them into the Inner West Council's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I've known so many people who've had their lives transformed when they finally gain access to affordable, secure rentals. And how, positively this has uplifted them in their social lives and also their physical and mental health. And I have to say that that's also what has happened to me. That access to affordable housing has definitely lifted me up. And I would really love for other people in the Inner West to have that same opportunity. So I commend this motion to you, and hope we can move forward in this area during the term.
Mayor Byrne, I would be happy to second the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Do you wish to speak to it?
I do, just briefly. I'll thank Councillor Griffiths for bringing it to Council, and I feel confident in saying that when it comes to the issue of housing affordability, we on this Council are on a unity ticket. As Councillor Griffiths has noted, the actions detailed in this motion are not radical. We know that Sydney is the third worst city in the world for housing affordability, and this has only worsened throughout the COVID pandemic. Experts have predicted that the situation will deteriorate further this year and that Sydney will reach its worst affordability in a decade in 2022. One impact of the affordable housing crisis is the displacement of key workers in essential industries, including emergency services, healthcare and education, as they are priced out of the neighbourhoods where they work. This displacement has an adverse impact on both the economic development and social diversity of communities. I also note the desperate need for an increased build of social housing, with a statewide waitlist of more than 50,000 households waiting in excess of 10 years for access to secure and affordable housing. While many of the levers to address housing affordability fall under the purview of state and federal governments, and I personally look forward to working over the next year to elect progressive governments that will take action to increase the supply of affordable and social housing in New South Wales, there are actions that we can take at a local government level to improve supply of housing locally, as detailed in this motion. And I look forward to working with fellow councillors, staff and housing providers to identify and action these opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those, Councillor Griffiths, a right of reply?
I'll just say I'll bring a more radical motion at a future council meeting.
Yeah, you've been far too right-wing for far too long. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I think that's unanimous. Is there anyone against? That's carried unanimously. Next item. Sorry, forgive me, just lost my screen. Next item is item 14, Rainbow Pathway for World Pride.
Thank you. And look, I'd like to start by acknowledging and thanking Council's LGBTQ working group for their advice and collaboration on this, both for asking Council in the first place to look at creating a rainbow crossing in the Inner West, and in working together with me over the last 6 months to look at ways that we can take this idea forward. As I've noticed and noted in the business papers, Council resolved back in December 2019 to investigate installing a rainbow crossing at the intersection of King Street and Enmore Road in Newtown as a visible sign of pride and support for our LGBTQ community. However, such on-road crossings require the approval of Transport for New South Wales, and they have advised Council that they wouldn't support a rainbow crossing in this location. And I know they're also quite unlikely to approve other locations for permanent on-road rainbow crossings, which is not to say we shouldn't keep trying, absolutely not. But with World Pride now less than 12 months away, what I'm proposing is that we look at an alternative that would allow us to go ahead with this idea without necessarily waiting for their approval. So to look at delivering a rainbow path instead of an on-road crossing, because and we could do it using a simpler process and deliver it in time for that event. And as noted in the motion too, the discussions that I've had with the working group and with council staff have already yielded some really excellent suggestions, including a rainbow path that could be outside the Newtown Town Hall, where we're going to locate the Pride Centre, a painted path within Camperdown Memorial Rest Park, where Fair Day has been held in the past and which is significant for the local community, and a really interesting idea about using coloured lighting to light up one of the paths in that park to create a different kind of rainbow path. The LGBTQ working group also asked us to look at ways we can look to tell the story of our community through this project as well, similar to how the Rainbow Walk that's in Adelaide has painted dates and stories onto its pathway that note key milestones for the South Australian LGBTQ community. So I've incorporated this into the motion too, and I commend it to you.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Locke. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, there is.
Councillor Atkins.
I don't need to say very much, simply to support this, and like Councillor Lockie to acknowledge the great work that our LGBTQ working group is doing. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
I thank you. I just I have two amendments just to add to the end. So adding points 5 and 6, Catherine.
I'll just ask for the minute takers to display the amended wording on the screen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to both Councillor Lockie and to the LGBTQ working group for bringing this motion forward. I'm very pleased to support the motion. A rainbow pathway is a fabulous idea, and I'm also adding 2 additional amendments after consulting Councillor Lockie and members of the LGBTQ working group. So in addition to establishing a rainbow pathway, I'm proposing to submit a proposal to the Geographical Names Board to rename the public square at the front of Newtown Town Hall as Pride Square. This will further centre Newtown and the Inner West as the beating heart of Sydney and Australia's LGBTQ+ community. I'm also moving to establish a subcommittee chaired by Deputy Mayor D'Arienzo and consisting of Councillors Lockie and Atkins, 2 representatives of the LGBTQ working group and relevant staff to really drive our engagement with Sydney World Pride, which is due to occur in February and March next year. Sydney World Pride presents a once-in-a-lifetime social and economic opportunity for the Inner West, and we need leadership from Council to ensure we're taking full advantage of all the opportunities arising from this global event. The Inner West just has to be invited to this party. Our historic venues, bustling main streets and beautiful parks can be host to festivities. Residents and businesses can see the rich diversity and inclusion of our streets and suburbs celebrated in the World Pride program. And Council can continue to show the progressive leadership we're known for and really spotlight the energy and passion of our LGBTQ+ communities. Establishing a committee to focus on the events and role we can play in it will help, on the event and the role we can play in it will help concentrate and guide the resources of Council and help facilitate our engagement with Sydney World Pride. It will build on the important work already being done by the LGBTQ working group and staff to incorporate us into the event, and is in no way designed to replace that work. I note that this subcommittee is designed to complement and not to replace the leading role of the LGBTQ working group in this regard. And again, I thank Councillor Lockie for her motion and commend these amendments to councillors.
Thanks very much, Councillor Howard. Is there a seconder for Councillor Howard's amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor D'Arienzo.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by acknowledging Councillor Lockie for bringing forward this motion and support the additional rainbow crossings in addition to the one that exists in Summer Hill. In relation to the amendment, next year is going to be here before we know it, and our area is going to be covered in glitter to celebrate the LGBTQI extravaganza of World Pride. After 23 years of being hosted exclusively by the Northern Hemisphere, in 2019 it was confirmed that it will be headed to Sydney for the first time. So the proposal of the working group is to focus on the opportunities to connect with World Pride and plan events to take place within our LGA. I believe that February 2023 will be here in a flash, and I want to make sure that we are planned, prepared, and that we deliver rainbow connections for our community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor de Cruz.
Yep. Thank you for bringing this motion, and thank you for the amendments. I think the establishment of a World Pride Committee is vital. This week, I attended the opening of the Bamali Mardi Gras exhibition. That's an annual event, and had a wonderful story retold to us by Uncle Jeffrey of his long life and the difficulties faced. And even on the way, I met another 78er. So it's actually so embedded in the Inner West that I really do hope that it just isn't around Newtown, that it's the whole of the Inner West. And of course, Leichhardt was Dykhardt, and then we have the 78ers who all reside within the Inner West. And I think that this is all the sort of multifaceted heritage, arts, all those kinds of things, history, that are so important to showcase the Inner West. And I do hope that our World Pride Committee will work well with the World Pride Committee to make sure that the Inner West is very, very much part of the festival that comes to Sydney next year. And I believe Bumali's already in conversation with them. So yes, this is a great move. So thank you for bringing it forward. And let's move forward and see what the celebration will be next February. Thanks.
Okay. I'll just go to Councillor Lockie. Are you willing to incorporate those amendments, Councillor Lockie?
Yes, of course, I'd be delighted to.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the primary motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Lockie for a right of reply.
Look, I think everybody's covered it really sufficiently. I just want to thank the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Howard and Councillor Atkins for their very open and collaborative approach to working on this. And may I say, it is just lovely to be able to bring LGBTQ related motions to council and have it be such a positive experience.
Thanks very much for that. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody who's against? No, I declare that unanimous. That is carried. Next item, item 15, Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack Aquatic Centres.
Thank you, Mayor. We've undertaken to insource Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack from the 1st of July, with the previous Marrickville Council having decided to outsource management and staffing to Belgravia. This is a great opportunity for a very significant project, one which I believe would be best result. The best result would come from councillors being fully across the transition plans and, if needed, being able to intervene on behalf of the community they represent. These facilities are a great contribution to the Inner West. Last year, during the lockdown, unfortunately, workers at these facilities, many being casual, were stood down without pay during the lockdown. I want this transition process to be a positive experience for residents and staff, hopefully with minimal or no downtime for the facilities, where residents are offered great services from the get-go, and where the staff currently employed by Belgravia, who have made these centres great for more than a decade, are recognised and treated with respect. The insourcing needs to have a just transition process for the staff. Part of this could be recognising the service of staff who successfully moved from Belgravia to council for the purposes of the industrial instrument, the local government award. I was concerned when councillors were informed, and 24th of the 1st was the email that I'm referring to primarily, that council currently anticipates it will advertise for positions and recruit using council's standard recruitment process. This would mean that the current workers at the facilities would be competing for their current or similar roles with the general public. While I know that the staff at Annette Kellerman and Fanny Durack would be really well placed in terms of their experience, service at the pools, and there's also a labour shortage in the swimming industry. In my opinion, I think having a process where people are reapplying for their current roles in competition with the general public would simply not be an outcome which I think is preferable. And I think other people here might agree, but we'll find out. I hope the insourcing at this scale would consider, I guess, sympathetic recruitment options for current Belgravia staff who wish to continue at the site. Processes such as direct appointment, ring fencing, streamlined applications. Previously, earlier tonight, we heard that EOIs might be examined. I think this needs to go beyond collecting people's email addresses and letting them know when something's advertised. Actually needs to be a more secure process, in my opinion. You'll notice that recruitment is in the name of the motion, but not really addressed in the substance. That's because parts of the motion weren't accepted for the agenda. In general, though, I really commend the speakers from earlier tonight and thank you for speaking out. I think it's really hard to share employment experiences publicly and in this type of forum. So yeah, thank you for coming along, and look forward to meeting you in the future. And I hope that the council and all councillors can ensure that we head towards a transition process which is fair and just for those who currently serve our community by working at these pools.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. Just before I ask if there's a seconder, the General Manager has clarified earlier in the meeting that there is a report scheduled for the May Ordinary Council meeting. Is it your intention or insistence that there be a second report in April, or are you happy for the issue that you've raised to be incorporated into the substantive report, which is already scheduled for May?
Councillors, I do think it should be an April report.
Okay.
So we actually
just clarifying that it wasn't an invitation for a second speech. Okay. I'll just see if there's a seconder and flag my attention to move an amendment to simply receive the report in May. Is there a seconder for the primary motion?
I'm happy to second it, Councillor Byrne.
Smith?
Yep, I'll second the motion. I'm very enthusiastic about the return of both Fanny Durack and Annette Kellerman Aquatic Centres into council hands later this year, and I might just take a moment to acknowledge, it being International Women's Day, that both of these aquatic centres are named after pioneering Australian women and champion professional swimmers who broke down many barriers for women to compete professionally in international sports. So it's really wonderful that two of our iconic pools in the Inner West are named in honour of women athletes. I also want to acknowledge the hardworking and dedicated staff at both centres who have made an enormous contribution to the safety and enjoyment of Inner West residents who use these pools. And I think investigating the prospect of recognition of service of current staff is an appropriate acknowledgement of this contribution. If the COVID lockdown taught us anything, it was just how important community recreation and leisure facilities like these aquatic centres are for our physical and mental health. It was deeply disappointing to hear how casual staff were treated by current centre management during last year's lockdown, including a lack of support provided to casual staff as pools were closed for months, leaving many without a source of income. I also acknowledge the concerns of staff regarding the transition to in-house management taking place in July, including the two staff members who spoke earlier in the meeting, and I thank them for their contributions. I am very optimistic that bringing these aquatic centres back in-house this year will allow council to better support both the staff and the residents to use our local pools. It's appropriate and important that both councillors and centre staff are kept up to date on this progress and process of the transition. And I note that councillors are due to receive a briefing from council staff on the transition process next week at the council workshop, and also that council staff are currently preparing a report on the transition, as Mayor Byrne noted, and I look forward to receiving these reports. As a council representing both Petersham and Enmore, where these pools are located, I reiterate my support for a transition process that is undertaken in consultation with staff and their representatives and to best practice standards. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Smith. Can I just, in the interests of unanimity, can I just seek clarification from the General Manager? There was reference earlier to a report being prepared for May, which is the report on the total transition. Is it possible for that report, which sounds like it is nearing conclusion or has been concluded, to incorporate the issue being raised in this motion and to be reported to April instead?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, we're quite happy to report to April, noting that the transition is happening 1 July. So I think the earlier we report back to council, the better.
Okay, excellent. Further discussion? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Griffiths for a right of reply.
I'll waive that right.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody against the motion? No, I declare that to be unanimous. Sorry, I'm just switching between screens. Next item is item 16, Dulwich Hill Station Crossing.
Thank you, Mayor. So we heard from Mark Skelsey earlier tonight, who is very active in the Dulwich Hill community and drafted up a petition raising this very important issue, which has been a spectre over Dulwich Hill for a very long time. Well, when I lived on Wardell Road, I definitely noticed this crossing sticking out as a thumb every time you're going past the station, and I've seen, dangerous circumstances in the making, I'm sure have many residents. And I know they have, because so many have signed the petition. It's great that we have the opportunity to do these works. And I think if there's a push from the community, it's intuitive that the council joined them in that push to make sure that the works get done. So it'll be great if we advocate that the completion of these works to Transport New South Wales, and also get councillors be made aware on what other things are outstanding. So yeah, I commend this motion to you.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for bringing this motion. I acknowledge that this is an ongoing fight for the Dulwich Hill community that's been continuing for a number of years. I too lived not too far from the station and saw far too many near misses that I'd like to report. I'd like to acknowledge the advocacy of individuals and community groups like Save Dully Action Group, who were staunch in their advocacy on this issue. We know that the Inner West Council has approved the works for a raised and signalised crossing at the station. We know that we are awaiting the traffic control system approvals for the from Transport for New South Wales. We know that this existing crossing is dangerous because it's on a crest, around a bend, and barely visible. The proposed upgrade will significantly improve pedestrian safety for the community, parents with children, students, workers, people using the train stations. Large numbers of local commuters use this crossing daily. I'd like to also acknowledge the work of our state member, Joe Halen, in calling on Transport for New South Wales to act urgently. We too will, as this motion calls on, will write to Transport for New South Wales. We need them to get on with the job.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? There's no further discussion. I'll go to Councillor Griffiths for a right of reply.
I'll waive it. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously, I believe. Is there anyone against? No, excellent. Item 17, demerger of Inner West Council.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to that motion.
Yes, Councillor.
Yes, this is a really simple motion and it's really just about good governance from council. It's about ensuring that there is full transparency and best practice project management regarding the preparation of the council's business case for the demerger of Inner West Council. Noting that at our last meeting on the 8th of February, council undertook to prepare that business case. And also noting that there were no timeframes set or parameters for the preparation of that business case. I want to thank the community member Alice Kershaw for supporting this motion earlier this evening. And I want to note that the request here is to have a timeline for that business case, to also have a progress report at each council meeting, and then also have publishing regular updates in Inner West News or whatever publications we end up going with as council. I also want to note that item 7 on tonight's agenda about the Dawn Fraser bars and the internal audit report from Ernst & Young, and highlighting the importance of robust project management practice, and council, the recommendation for council to adopt a formal project management framework for staff. And I do think that this business case fits squarely within that. It's very important for us to have really clear project management frameworks. So I do think that the onus is on councillors and council staff to ensure that the community are properly informed. We all know that 63% of residents voted in support of demerging the council. And the community want to know how they will be involved in consultation and preparation of the business case. And they want to know how long it will take to prepare the business case and when the business case will be provided to the minister. If we have a good, robust project management framework, then we can apply that to this business case. And I think that that we need to be responsible managers in that way. So I'd like to commend this motion to all the councillors this evening, and I hope that you will support it and that we will, show the community that we actually are genuine in our development of a solid business case, and we are transparent in sharing information about the case. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'd like to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Stanless, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Langford, for bringing this forward and to also put some structure behind this process. I think you are well and truly right. I think there's some expectations there out in the community that that we will keep them informed, keep the community informed as to what's going on with this huge poll, where we saw a 63% to 37% support for the demerger. And I know, as I'm speaking to residents on a day-to-day basis, this is the first question that comes up. What is council doing? How are they going about it? Is there a lot of energy put into this task to respond to what the community wanted? So I do appreciate very much that you put this forward tonight. I'm very happy to second this. And I think that it's important now that our council gets some energy and some structure and some certainty behind this process. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. We have diligent staff. And as put by Labor at the last council meeting and resolved by this council, the preparation of the business case commenced immediately. Councillor Langford does not need to bring a motion to every council meeting asking for this to happen. Although it is true, as Councillor Langford says, the cost of demerging would be millions, complex, perhaps impossible. It will only cost millions if the business case is accepted. And then, yes, it would be a task needing complex oversight to manage the systems, the people, the reputational damage, the possibility of risk that seems sky high. However, I am confident that the staff we have are capable of getting on with the job of making a case for splitting up this council in a documentary way, while also getting on with their job and ours of running the Inner West Council. And as adopted at the last meeting, the business case will be prepared thoroughly, the community will be included and kept informed. At an operational level, I'm sure the staff will devise us and inform us in due course of a sensible plan for doing so. This motion is redundant.
Thank you, Councillor. There's been 2 councillors for and 1 councillor against. Is there any other councillor who wishes to speak against the motion? There's no further speakers against the motion. I'll go to the mover for a right of reply.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this motion is really about giving the community confidence and a timeline and just having transparency. I think it's an issue that we all know as councillors is an issue where community are often not informed, and it's really important that we give them confidence. We can't expect them to act on, to have no information. We actually need to put something out there that gives them confidence that something is being done, and it's important for all of us to be kept informed. I don't think it's good enough to say that, yes, it will be done. We need some structure and framework. We need to show that we are actually professional and we have a plan. So I don't think that's too much to ask. Any project, that information just should be available to everyone who's interested. So yeah, I would again like to commend the motion. I don't think it's redundant. I do trust the staff and I do have a lot of faith in the staff. So this is no reflection on the staff themselves. It's actually just about ensuring that we have the information that we need to understand what is happening and when it will be happening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors. Sorry, I just have to change my view. In support, I have councillors Lockie, Griffiths, Stanless, De Cruz, Langford, Atkins, Shetty, and all those against. Against, I have councillors Scott, D'Arienzo, Smith, De Cruz.
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, okay. I'll go back to the start. Against, I have councillors Scott, D'Arienzo, Smith, Sardulius, Howard, Drury, Stevens, and myself. That has been defeated. Next item, item 18, consultation on projects of significant interest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that motion.
Yes. You wish to speak to it, councillor?
Yes, please. I'd like to start by acknowledging the work of the community and engagement team who have delivered us two fundamental documents in which this motion builds on. That is the council's community engagement policy and framework. The Inner West community has a strong desire to have a voice in council's decision making. Community engagement is the process by which the community participates in and influences that decision making. With good community engagement, we put ourselves in the best position to implement change. And by bringing together all the stakeholders, the community, the council executive, the elected representatives, we have the best chance of success to understand the reasons for the decisions that are being made, to open dialogue with each other, to share perspectives, to collaborate and to problem solve. This particular motion calls for the executive team of council to attend community public forums for projects of significant community interest. It will demonstrate to the community the council's commitment to genuine and authentic community consultation to listen and respond to issues. Having decision makers present will be conducive to resolving problems and enhance project outcomes. At the heart of this motion is to improve outcomes and build trust. Thank you.
Thanks very much, councillor. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I'd like to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shetty.
Yes, I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor D'Arienzo for bringing this motion to council. It's obviously really important that as a council we work towards ensuring that as many residents as possible are able to have their say and contribute to the direction of council projects. We need to be wary that council doesn't rely too heavily on online modes of consultation and that there's wide and varied ways of engaging with different linguistic and cultural groups, with elderly residents and others who may not have access to the internet, and to other disenfranchised groups that traditionally have difficulty engaging on local issues that may affect them. The availability of the executive team to answer questions and to engage with residents on projects of significant interest is a really important step for the community to be better engaged and to feel that their voices and their contributions are heard. So I'm happy to second this motion and I hope that the other councillors will support it too.
Thanks very much, councillor. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to the Deputy Mayor for a right of reply.
I waive that.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? I think that is unanimous. Is there anyone against the motion? No, that has been carried. Next item. Item 19, Railway Terrace and West Street Petersham intersection.
Thank you, Mayor Byrne. I move this motion tonight on behalf of the residents of Petersham who have raised safety concerns about the intersection at Railway Terrace and West Street for many years. In particular, I acknowledge the parents, caregivers and school community of Petersham Public School, who are particularly concerned given the high volume of school students who navigate the intersection on their way to and from school. Both Railway Terrace and West Street are rat runs connecting major arterial roads through the Inner West. These roads come to a head, sometimes quite literally, at this intersection, causing frequent bottlenecks and traffic jams. The hazard to pedestrians is compounded by having to undertake a two-staged crossing at the intersection, requiring significant waiting time, as well as the narrow footpaths which place pedestrians close to the roadway. Vehicles also frequently block the intersection during periods of heavy traffic, forcing pedestrians onto the roadway. The current situation actively discourages pedestrians and cyclists from navigating the intersection, presenting a significant impediment to active transport and walkability, particularly for school children. Moreover, it presents a real and serious safety risk. Addressing this problem will not only improve safety, but also encourage greater uptake of active transport, particularly for school children. We know the many benefits that active transport provides to our community, including reduced congestion, improved public health, fewer emissions, and improved air quality. As per the community strategic plan, Council is committed to supporting active transport networks and walkability. It is incumbent on Council to play a leadership and advocacy role in support of the community to address the significant safety issues at this intersection. The motion also calls on Council to work with the broader community to support safe walking and cycling around our neighbourhoods, with a particular focus on our local schools. I commend this motion, and I also commend the work to date of the school community and our local member for Summerhill, Joe Halen, on advocating and progressing this issue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Smith. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, there is, Councillor Atkins.
Councillor Atkins, do you wish to speak to it?
Very, very briefly, thank you, Mayor. Just to thank Councillor Smith for her work on this. These issues around this intersection have been around for a long time. It was raised before in petitions taken by the local member to State Parliament in 2018, 2019 and 2020. Councillor Steer had a notice of motion about it in May last year, which I myself spoke to. So I'm really pleased to see that Council is once again picking this up and reminding the state government that there's work to be done to keep our children safe. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Atkins. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Smith for a right of reply.
I'll waive it, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anyone against? No, declare that carried. Item 20, notice of motion, Inner West Council anti-racism strategy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have oh no, it's there, it's included. Great, thank you. An amendment, slight amendment to what's in the business paper there in point 2. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you to residents who spoke earlier just so powerfully in support of the motion tonight. As the motion states, the Inner West is the birthplace of Australian multiculturalism. Fostered on land owned by the Gadigal and Wangal people, our suburbs were built by generations of migrant families. We warmly welcome refugees and those seeking asylum. We understand here in the Inner West that our diversity is our strength. Still, racism exists in every community. It exists here, and we have a responsibility to confront, dismantle, and eliminate it. An anti-racism strategy gives us an important opportunity to raise awareness around racism, to foster programs that promote inclusion, and to empower our community to eliminate racism. I acknowledge the important work of the Inner West Council Multicultural Advisory Committee and the Inner West Multicultural Network, who've shown such extraordinary leadership on combating racism and promoting inclusion, including the Racism Not Welcome campaign. I acknowledge the work of councillors over many years in this space, including Councillor Sam Iskander over many, many years, and more recently Councillor Lockie, and many local community organisations like Metro Assist, the Addison Road Community Centre, Community and Cultural Connections Incorporated, Settlement Services International, and the many, many First Nations organisations that serve our community. I also acknowledge the important work already being done by staff to support our First Nations and culturally and linguistically diverse communities, including developing a reconciliation action plan, supporting First Nations artists, businesses and communities, signing up to the Racism It Stops With Me campaign, celebrating Refugee Week and supporting the Community Refugee Welcome Centre. An anti-racism strategy offers an important opportunity to bring that work together into a clear framework and to create space for new initiatives and programs that further foster and promote an inclusive and diverse inner West that is free from racism. The amendment that I've put in number 2 there seeks to create a clearer framework for delivering the strategy and responds to feedback to ensure it is rooted in grassroots engagement from residents, hardworking members of the Inner West Council Multicultural Advisory Committee, and with the expertise of the Inner West Multicultural Network. I commend the motion to councillors.
Thanks very much, Councillor Howard. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I'll second.
Councillor Lockie.
Thank you. Look, I just want to say thank you to Councillor Howard for bringing this forward, and to our speakers, Yana, Queen and Wales, for coming and speaking so powerfully to us tonight about this. Thank you too for amending the second point of that motion. I think that's a really important inclusion, not just for developing that framework, but also acknowledging that the Inner West, our Multicultural Advisory Committee and the Inner West Multicultural Network have been such an explicit part of our work in anti-racism and multiculturalism for many years now, and we're very much advocating for council to develop an anti-racism strategy for tackling this really toxic issue in our local area. I was and I remain really proud that we were the first council in Australia to introduce the Racism Not Welcome campaign and to see it launch here. But as our speakers noted, that was always intended to just be the beginning of a wider grassroots approach to tackling racism in a very real way within our local community. So I look forward to seeing the strategy develop.
Thanks very much, Councillor Lockie. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Howard for his right of reply.
I don't think there's anything I could say that was more eloquent, convincing or powerful than what the speakers contributed in the public forum.
Thanks very much, Councillor Howard. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I believe that's carried unanimously. Is there anybody against the motion? No, I declare that carried. Councillors, it's time to go into confidential session. Can I get a motion to move into confidential session? Moved by Councillor Lockie, seconded by Councillor de Cruz. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We'll just hold on for a minute or two while the broadcast is being turned off. Catherine, if you could let us know when that happens, that would be great.
Will do.